Welcome to Safe on Deck. Episode 25 is part 2 of my interview with Senior Chief Chris Massicotte. Chris joined the Navy in May of 1999 and trained as an avionics technician aboard Naval Air Station Pensacola and Naval Air Station Oceana. Chris spent much of his career at sea on 6 different operational deployments, including Operation Enduring Freedom, Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Anaconda, Operation New Dawn, and Operation Tomodachi. Throughout his career, Chris was stationed across the United States on assignments to AIMD Fallon, USS John C Stennis, CNATTU Jacksonville, Naval Air Station Pensacola, and as a member of VFA 154, the Black Knights, and VAQ 132, the Scorpions. For his final tour in the Navy, Chris was selected to join the Blue Angels, where he served in the position of Quality Assurance Supervisor and Maintenance Control Supervisor for 3 years, before being detailed to serve on the Legacy-to-Super Hornet transition team. Chris retired from the Navy in 2021 as an Aviation Electronics Technician, Senior Chief, with over 22 years of distinguished service. Thanks for taking the time to listen. In the future, I plan to continue to share similar interviews with both current and retired military aviators. If you have a question or a suggestion for a future interview, please leave it as a comment below. Safe on Deck, Episode 25, Part 2, with Senior Chief Chris Massicotte. Enjoy. Okay, Chris, so I'm trying to remember where I was in time and space, where I was in the world when the hurricane, it wasn't even a hurricane, it was a tsunami, right?
It was a tsunami.
In Japan.
Yeah, it was a large earthquake off the coast of Japan, caused a massive tsunami.
But I mean, I read about it in the news, or I saw it on TV. You were there. You lived part of the relief efforts. I was hoping maybe you could tell that story.
Yes. So was on deployment with the Ronald Reagan. We were actually off the coast of Hawaii. And we actually were in the area of Hawaii for a couple days because we had to do one last reactor inspection before the deployment. And so we were actually heading that way, supposed to go to Korea. We were doing I think it's Operation Noble Eagle. Foal Eagle. Foal Eagle.
Yeah, Noble Eagle's air defense. Foal Eagle's the big joint exercise.
So that's what we were supposed to be doing. We were going to go to Korea, do that exercise, and then probably do some stuff in the South China Sea, and then we were going to eventually go and relieve the Carl Vinson. That was the deployment plan. Woke up the morning that it happened, and it was there was a weird vibe. It was just very quiet. Normally you would hear like hustle and bustle. We were supposed to do flight ops, and so I went down to the mess and looked at the plat, and all the aircraft were pushed like all the way back. They had pulled everything from the bow, and that's normally not how you'd set up for flight ops. Normally there's either 1 row or 4 row. There's airplanes lined up so they can either start with Cat 1 or 2 and start launching. And I happened to see Dog, who's like he's the flight deck control representative for the CAG, so he basically is like the air wing liaison to the squadrons, to the handler. So whenever you need like, hey, Dog, I need a grape on 102, they'll throw a grape nut on there, and that'll peg it for fuel, or if you need a wing spread or something, they'll pull it. They're the ones that are coordinating that, so that you can get the aircraft pulled forward, spread the wings, like load a missile or do your inspection. So saw a Dog, and I'm like, hey, this isn't normal. And he's like, yeah, check out that channel, and so we had the Platt TV, and there was CNN or whatever news channel was on, and it was talking about this massive earthquake and tsunami, and there was all the pictures of just Japan just kind of in flooded ruins, and said we're steaming that way to go, just do whatever. So they moved everything back aft. So that's typically what they'll do when they're going to go really, really fast. So if there's any breaking waves over the bow, you're not going to soak any of the airplanes. So over the course of the entire night, they pushed everything back and got us to go. And it took a couple days steaming that way. Well, in the midst of all that steaming that way, there was the whole Fukushima reactor stuff going on. And, to this day, there's still a lot of like back and forth as to what really went on there. I know there's a lawsuit because they stated that that whatever the company is that owned, that they kind of underplayed how bad that reactor was damaged, and they were using seawater to try to cool it all down, and all that seawater is getting washed into the ocean, and nobody kind of knew how bad that reactor was damaged. And I guess eventually it kind of melted, and a little bit of radioactive gas got released, and unbeknownst to us, which I extremely vividly remember all these chain of events, and so I don't think it fits the narrative that we were given so much, but this is how I remember it. We kind of steamed through, and everybody was just kind of focused on what we were going to be doing. The word that we got was get sharpest pod ready, which is it's a tactical reconnaissance pod. So we had aircraft that had sharpest pods configured, and typically it's, you're putting 2 drop tanks on the wings and then the sharp pod on the center line, and then tankers to support the sharp operations. But pretty much everything else is not going to move. And they stuffed the hangar with all the aircraft that they could to try to clear the flight deck. And we were just going to be doing helo and COD ops. So they were landing CODs and offloading the CODs, filling up helos, and having the helos take supplies to people. And then the Sharps aircraft were kind of flying up and down the coast and getting a bunch of reconnaissance photos. And then Civic, which is the carrier information control center, they were going through all those photos, and there was actually like Japanese people that were putting like SOS and that were stranded because roadways had been washed out. There was places where there was once very easy access that has now been completely cut off. So they were flying out there and either dropping off supplies, picking up people that needed any kind of assistance. So some really good operations were going on, but unbeknownst to us, all this nuclear radiation getting pumped into the both the water and into the atmosphere was going on. And so at one point, we actually steamed right through the both the water and the plume. So the carrier actually sucked up that nuclear water and then desalinated it, and it was being circulated through the system of the ship. And then all the atmosphere, the dust and whatnot that had accumulated got on our airplanes, it got on the ship, and it was just a whole mess. But there was so on a nuclear carrier, they will do kind of spot checks to make sure the reactors aren't leaking. And they do the spot checks, I'm sure it's like a lottery. They pick like 5 compartments, and then the reactor department will go and they'll kind of make some radiac measurements, and they'll go, these are all normal readings. Well, what had happened was they were going around and doing these readings, and they got a bunch of high readings. And they were kind of concerned about these high readings, and so they said, let's take another couple random, compartments. Got some other abnormal readings. So there was probably a good 2 to 3 days while they tried to figure out what was going on before anybody kind of put the pieces together as to what truly had happened. Because the first thought was, well, maybe our reactor is leaking. And at the time, the Reagan did have some reactor issues. That was why we were off the coast of Hawaii doing that reactor inspection. So, to everybody on board, it was kind of like, well, of course there's going to be reactor issues. We've had a ton of reactor issues. That whole workup, it was pretty much centered around issues with the Reagan and its reactor. So nobody kind of thought anything of it until we kind of, more news started trickling out about Fukushima. And then it's like, oh man, this thing is billowing out radiation. It's been, they're trying to cool it down with seawater. And so the skipper got on the 1MC and basically announced that one of our, fresh water tanks has been contaminated. They've got high levels of radiation, or what they consider to be high, and the whole time they're trying to assure us they're high based on what our standards are, but our standards are very, they're very low in considering that, these radiation levels are still very low, but they're high than what we would like to see. They're trying to kind of downplay it a little bit, but it was determined that we kind of plowed right through this. So all of our aircraft that were up on deck got contaminated, and it turned into on top of all the operations that we were doing as far as humanitarian relief, we also went into a CBR environment, chemical, biological, radiological. So we had to don all the MOP gear, the mission-oriented protective posture gear. So on top of it's in March, up on the north side of Japan, cold, completely cold. So I was suiting up with like 2 to 3 pairs of socks, long johns, sweatpants, my flight deck pants, and then the MOP gear, kind of same thing on the top, and still going up and just freezing. But so we had all this MOP gear on, MOP boots, wearing the gloves, flight deck, float coat, just completely decked out. And they had every exit and entrance closed off to the flight deck. So the only way on and off the flight deck was through the forecastle. So every other one was chained and locked, so you couldn't. And they actually posted watches so that nobody, could cut a lock and go up. They wanted complete entry and exit controlled through the forecastle. And you would go out on the starboard side and back in through the port side. So, and then when you came in, you were getting radiac, and they were taking, measurements of everything. And then they would, regardless of your readings, would scrub your boots. And if all the readings were good, you could keep your boots, you could keep all your gear. But if you had any abnormal readings, you had to give it all up. So about 2 weeks into this, there was just a pile in the forecastle of float coats and gloves and, you name it, just boots. So we actually got to a point where people were running out of, gloves, or running out of float coats, running out of flight deck jerseys that were getting confiscated. But we had to continue doing flight ops. So, what I did is I just stayed up the whole time. So I would, in between the events, because we were launching probably 3 to 4 hour missions. So in between those launches, most of the guys would go off the deck and, have to get radiac. They'd have to get the measurements taken. They were getting all their stuff confiscated. I would just stay up there and help offload a cod and, just stay up for as long as I could. So I'd have the least amount of times to be checked, because I didn't want all my stuff confiscated, which in hindsight, that was probably, yeah, probably the opposite thing of what I should be doing, but still waiting on my superpowers. So, but it was kind of one of those things that when you're in the middle of it, you just weren't really thinking about it. You're already here. What are you going to do? But what they were finding was that a lot of the line shack was having their stuff taken because for whatever reason, I guess it was getting in the grease, and with the chains, and then them slinging the chains over their float coats. There was a lot of gloves and float coats getting confiscated, and they were thinking that that the radioactive particles were just getting in that and kind of making it easily attracted and able to stick. So, but yeah, we did Tomodachi for probably about 50 days. I think we were there doing that whole cycle of just launching and recovering sharpest pods, launch and recover the tankers. And not a single other airplane. The only time we were kind of switching out an airplane or getting anything from out of the hangar is if the tanker had to go down for specials, and we would reconfigure another airplane and then it would go down. So nothing really ever moved. It was we only had about 4 or 5 airplanes that were flying. This was between us and VFA 147, who was our sister squadron. And then you had the Hilo squadrons going. I don't remember much of the E2s flying. At the time, it was still the A6Bs. I don't remember them flying. If they were, it was a currency flight, getting them out for a currency flight. It was very minimal flight ops for those 50 days, and it was mainly support for the humanitarian efforts. I have my cruise book. I'll show you too. There's a lot of pictures in there, and I think because been talking about it kind of here recently, and our phones are listening to us. I don't know if you believe that or not, but I do, because all of a sudden on YouTube, I got a lot of tsunami videos, and there's some videos I hadn't seen before, of the entire, in about a 10-minute period, the water levels and every, just normal life going on to complete saturation, just, people going to as high as they can and still getting overtaken by water. So it's just kind of fascinating to watch. But we had another big thing that we were doing is as we were steaming along, there was houses, like full houses just floating by, and they were going out and, you know, making sure nobody was in there. And same thing with boats, a lot of boats. So they were sending like the motor whale boat and the rib boats out, trying to get the helo guys out there and just try to see if anybody was on there, and a couple recovery efforts, you know.
In your position working on the flight deck, did you ever get to interact with any of the pilots? And I'm guessing this is kind of a lonely thing, right? Like you're describing very clearly the way flight deck operations worked, and you know it sucks very badly when you literally have to go up one way and down one way, and things are, good Lord, doors are chained. Like I get it, but by the same token, you're experiencing it almost kind of like the rest of us on TV. The folks that are actually flying in there, I'm guessing, you know, like you talked about making those rescues and, you know, actually bringing, you know, supplies. Do you know what they were bringing in the cause? Was it just food and water and that type of stuff?
I remember Listerine, a lot of Listerine. There was like a lot of feminine products, you know, tampons, that kind of thing, food. Just, it was like a wide range of things. Just a lot of just various things, a lot of water. There was a lot of just pallets of water, that kind of thing. But yeah, it was like, you name it, it was probably being offloaded at one point, you know, just whatever was needed. And there was little staging areas. So, you know, they'd put all this stuff here, all this stuff there, and they were kind of figuring out who needed what.
What did life look like after those 50 days, after that operation was over and you all were headed back toward home?
Well, there was a lot of question marks because we all knew we'd gotten radiated. We all knew our aircraft were contaminated. We knew the ship was contaminated. And there was a big kind of like, what's next? Because there was like talk, are we going home? You know, now are we pulling the plug on this whole deployment? Or are, you know, so there was a lot of rumors and you didn't know what was true because, of course, the ship, 5,000 people, they're all talking, you know, I know from this person who's, you know, dating a 4-star admiral, they said that we can't pull into any port. You know, we're like this, you know, complete and total, you know, pariah that can't go anywhere because you're all radiated. So, and then, you know, the flip side of that coin was, no, we're perfectly fine. We're steaming on. We're gonna, everything is all good, you know. So you just didn't know what to believe, you know. You didn't know what. We were doing the operations, and it got to a point where they had enough. They brought in a lot of like Gator freighters and whatnot to kind of, which are more equipped, you know, because they're designed for mass helo operations. Because it was mainly a helo kind of thing once they got established, you know. The initial COD wave and everything was just to get supplies out to the ship to do what we were doing. But once, you know, you're, you know, a month and a half into it, it was more something that they could easily handle with like an LHD or, you know, LHA. So they got to a point where they said, well, the Reagan needs to mosey on. We need to kind of go and do what we initially set out to do. So we had a port visit in Sasebo after, you know, we hadn't had a port visit really since we had left because we didn't even stop in Hawaii, which was normally you always stop like on the way out and the way back. You stop in Hawaii when you're on a Westpac. We didn't stop. So we had not, you know, had a port visit since we had left home. So, you know, everybody was excited about that. And then the SecNav was supposed to come out. So SecNav made a visit and, you know, it was a big deal. We actually got a day of liberty shortened because we all had to be on the, you know, for the SecNav visit. So that kind of like morale kind of tanked, but you know, you're like, it's the SecNav, you know, you have to enjoy this, you know. But we were able to pull into Sasebo, and from there was rumors of Thailand, and they panned out. So some of this, you know, like, are you too radiated for ports, that kind of thing, you know, kind of it filtered out, you know. It's like, okay, that's probably not true, you know. Sounds like we're going to be okay. And so it kind of everybody shifted gears and didn't really think about the radiation thing anymore, because it was like, hey, now we're heading towards Fifth Fleet, so we're going to be going and you know, supporting boots on the ground, doing what we kind of trained for through the whole workup. So, you know, people were kind of like recaging and refocusing on that. But you know, Thailand was very, very interesting port, and that was I'll never forget. We pulled in the day before Bin Laden had gotten taken out, and I know it was the day before because I was on duty, and so the day after I was actually checking into a hotel. So I was all excited. It's like really Sasebo. I don't know if you've ever been to Sasebo. We call it Sasablos because there's really not much, there's some things there, but overall it's not the best of Japanese experience. There's definitely places like Tokyo or even up in Misawa when we go there. It was a much better experience than Sasebo. It's got a couple things you can do. It's Hiroshima is just a quick train ride away. So there's some people that got to go and see that. And it's kind of a very weird, because you're walking around as like an American tourist in a, land that we decimated. So it's you got to go there kind of understanding that you're getting looked at with, not the best of looks. Anyway, so I get off of the boat from duty and I'm going to check into my hotel in Thailand, never been to Thailand, thinking it's going to be an awesome experience. And it was, it's a very interesting place. But some guy kind of walks up to me, he goes, "Hey, are you from the Reagan?" And it's like, it's this weird kind of, all the OPSEC videos you watch and everything, you're like, maybe, like, who are you? Like we're just trying to, you're on guard. And he's like, would you hear? He's like, I know, I think I've seen you on the Reagan. You're on there. Did you hear though? And I'm like, hear what? He's like, they got him. I'm like, they got who? He said, they got him. They got Obama. And I was like, are you kidding me? So, my heart sank. I'm like, they got Obama. Like, I was like, are you serious? Like, what are we going to do now? Like, what are they recalling us back to the ship? He's like, why would we go back to the ship? I'm going to go have a beer. He's like, we got him. And I was just kind of like dumbfounded. I'm like, what do you mean you're going to go have a beer? And I'm start looking around for other sailors. Like, someone's got to know, like, what are we doing? And he just kind of could tell that I had this weird look. And he's like, what? Why aren't you excited about this? I was like, are you telling me like Obama is dead? And he goes, not Obama, Osama. Did I say Obama? And I was just like, oh my gosh, Osama bin Laden is dead? They got him? I'm like, well, yes, let's go have a beer now. But I was totally freaked out about that, thinking like, was that a Freudian slip? That was just kind of
two very different meetings.
Yes, exactly.
Two very different people.
Yes. And I'm thinking that our president was taken out, and now, great, we're going to go back to the ship and go and, was like, this was not the news that I wanted to hear.
What a way to find out.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when it was Osama bin Laden, like, okay, that's good stuff right there. I don't know much about that, raid, because again, the Vincent, we were going to go relieve. And
they were involved in obviously the retrograde part of that.
They were, yes. So I know some people that are that were out there, and they've all been kind of sworn to secrecy. So it's just kind of one of those things that.
Yeah, some of those things should remain quiet.
Whatever the narrative is out there, that is what it is. But
yeah,
I'm sure as time goes on, maybe I'll hear a little bit more. But
yeah. Man, two big things on one deployment, but I think after that, you went to something even bigger and better. You know what I'm alluding to, so I'm wondering if you can maybe talk us through where you went next.
So, from VFA 154, because that was all 154, I did go to VAQ 132, so I went up to Whidbey Island.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, so
from supers to growlers?
To growlers,
okay.
Which, it's really like 97% super. That's what, it's a Super Hornet body, it's a Super Hornet, the engines, everything's the same, there's just different avionics, so it's a very... and they were looking for people to go up there with super experience because as they transitioned out of EA6Bs, an EA6B is a very hit it with a hammer, it's metal, it can take it, and the super is very fragile, sturdy but fragile if you don't treat it right. A lot of things can happen if you just start whacking on it. But
it's funny you mentioned that. It was a single seat Hornet in Bahrain, doing some kind of an FCF off the boat, and they had some kind of a very serious failure. I think actually it was the MO of that squadron, and they diverted into Bahrain. And some kind of an emergency happened as they were going into Bahrain. The airplane went off the runway at OBBI. Pilot ejected. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the story.
It was VFA 146.
Okay, 146. That jet was in our little revetment area at Bahrain, and it stayed there for several years while, of course, all the secret and all the important stuff came off of it first. The engines were gone. When I saw it, it was the hulk of an airplane, basically.
Yeah.
But when you make that comment, you're absolutely right. That airplane is more composite than you realize. honest.
Right.
The engines are metal, and there's metal in certain different spots, right? But it was quite a thing to go see one up close that had been that heavily damaged and realize that, I mean, I'm not going to say with a knife, but with a lot less of a tool than you might think, you could probably cut big holes in it and do other things because, aerodynamics doesn't care that the whole thing is metal. It only needs to be strong in certain spots.
Right.
But you don't realize that in an airplane until you see it kind of sort of taken apart almost.
Right.
So you're absolutely right.
Super solid, strong airplane. The Super Hornet, it's amazing. But yes, it does have, like if there's any little D-lam on it, on a composite surface, that D-lam, if you don't catch it and fix it in time, it'll just keep going and going. And, there was a lot of engineering dispositions that we'd have to write just for like little D-lams because of just how, quickly it could degrade the airplane. So they were welcoming me with open arms up there in Whidbey. Had a great time,
How long were those orders? 3 years?
3 years. And it kind of worked out because I was supposed to go to VAQ 137, which there's a hierarchy of Growler squadrons now. So it's the premier is the X-Bed squadrons, because the X-Beds, they don't go to the boat, they deploy, but they're typically going to Air Force bases, which I hate to say it, but Air Force has really nice bases, really nice facilities. I mean, they have more money for MWR. I mean, bottom line, our money is tied up into ships, so they have really nice facilities. But expeditionary, then if you're going to go to the boat, it's West Coast, because you don't have to hump all your tools, parts, and materials. You're only going to, sometimes you're still flying to San Diego, even if you're riding the Nimitz, because everybody kind of gets on board, in San Diego. But at least you're on that side of the world. And then the bottom of the barrel is deployment carrier East Coast, because now you got to got to hump all your stuff across the United States, and trying to get a 5, or I think they're deploying with 7 aircraft now, is what I've heard. I don't know if they've actually, but the Growler's kind of proven itself, and so they're looking to plus up how many they deploy with. So getting that across the states before deployment, it just doesn't make for good time. So I was going to VAQ 137, which is like the bottom. That's it was an East Coast deploying squadron, but for whatever reason, there's a shell game up there. There's like one guy who's in control of manning, at least he used to be. And he would say, like, you don't have orders to a VAQ, you have orders to me, and I figure out where you're going to go. So in a roundabout way, I got moved to VAQ 132, which was an expeditionary squadron. So I'm like, well, don't threaten me with a good time. So, I thought I was going to an East Coast, boat deploying squadron. I go to an expeditionary squadron. So the only downfall with the expeditionary is it's a much tighter turnaround. So you usually deploy within a year. So once you get back, I mean, you go on your POM leave, and then once you get back from that, you're right back in the workup cycle, and then you're deploying typically. So in a 3-year tour, I did 2 deployments. So it was a little bit fast paced as far as that goes, but it's less airplanes and about the same amount of people as I had in the Foxtrot squadron. So a lot easier to manage. I used to joke with them, like I could run maintenance from my house, just give me a call, but much easier to deal with. But that through that community, I met a couple of people that were, and it's something that I've always wanted to do, but I wanted to apply for the Blue Angels. And so I'd kind of like, it's been something that I always like map my career with, because as an AT senior chief, there's only one AT senior chief on the team, and so you have to line up your PRDs, your rotation dates. So, it actually just worked out to where I'm like, this tour, for going there for 3 years would perfectly line me up with the person that's currently on the team. So, and then I'd met some people that were previous. So there was Marshall Parks. I don't know if I can say names.
It's up to you, yeah. Hopefully Marshall is not upset.
I don't think he'd mind whatsoever. He'd get a kick out of it. But he was on in VAQ 132 with me, and so he would always talk it up. And it's just something I've always kind of eyeballed, because I just grew up with the Blues. My dad being an aviator. Saw them in China Lake. I think it was like in '93. And I made it to the team. I'm kind of giving
spoiler
away.
Alert,
Spoiler
yeah.
alert, right? But that when I made it on the team, 2017 was my first show season year. Our first air show outside of El Centro was China Lake, and we get something that has like all the show dates and it has like all the times, and it's kind of like our plan of the week, for that show site. And there's always a last visited, date. They always put that in there. That's something that the events coordinator has to track. And the last show date for China Lake was 93. So the last time the Blues were there was when I saw them when I was probably 8 years old, 7 years old. And here we are back after that long stint. And I was on the team. So I was like, it's like really kind of those things that you just kind of take a step back and go, wow, like this is cool.
That's incredible. Yeah. What a way to come back.
Right.
So I'm guessing, I think a lot of hay has been made of how pilots are selected and, the interview process. And obviously there's a pretty dramatic way that they let people know when they've been selected for the team. I know basically zero about how it works on the maintainer side of the house. So what is that process like? It's not like you just raise your hand and say, I want to go. Oh yeah, sounds great, Chris. We'll get you on the team. Well, there's probably more to it than that.
There's definitely more. First, you have to be recommended by your command. There's criteria that comes out. It typically comes out in what's called a nav admin, which is just a Navy-wide message, and it's just advertising for the following year, Blue Angels schedule for the next show team. And there's a whole MILPERS manual about the requirements and whatnot, but it's typically you just put in a request, and that has to route through your chain of command, the 1306 request. And so you have to get a command recommendation. So, if you're a dirtbag, your command's not recommending you. But once that process happens and you get approved and your detailers, because the other thing is your detailer has to be okay with it. So just because the command's okay with it, your detailer has to be okay with it. So and there's some things that people try. Some people have requested it and just gotten it through the command and then sent it to the Blues without sending it to their detailer. And that's actually happened where we've selected sailors to the Blues and then go to take the list up to say, hey, these are the people we want orders. And the detailers never got their 1306. And they're like, this person never talked to me. So I would not release them at this point because, they're too close to their PRD window and I have them selected for other things, so you've got to have open lines of communication with all involved. Your detailer is a key part in that whole process. So if your command says you're good, your detailer says you're good, then you're supposed to call the Blues and schedule an interview. And they typically tell you to stay for a whole week. If you could do it in El Centro, great. But, typically they want you to interview. Really, it doesn't matter where. It's just that week. Because I really want to get to know you, start to finish, see your work ethic, see kind of who you are, kind of get a good idea because it's, the Blues is such a tight-knit organization. It's not, you can hide it for a day, you can hide it for 2 days, but over the course of a week, you can't really probably hide some of your true colors over that course of time. And we need to know that because high stress, a lot, there's a lot of, there's a lot of good things, but there's also a lot of work that comes with it. There's a lot of you're going to have to work with everybody. So if you can't get along with everybody, it's just going to make for an even more stressful environment. So, it's gotten a lot more, I wouldn't say tame. I think it's gotten a lot more right over the years. It used to be they would take you out and get you drunk. And there's a lot of stories of just kind of some things that I think cross the line. Now it's a good thing. I know some of the older Blues will be like, oh, this is the worst thing ever. But, to me, there's inbounds and out of bounds. And there's a way to interview somebody, to feel them out, to do that, but without having to have alcohol involved, make them uncomfortable, do stupid things like that, So you do the interview.
Where was yours? Did you meet them on the road or was it
No, I actually went to Pensacola. So I came here and I did the week because, they say you want to be there the full week, in a Blues week would be Sunday to Thursday. That's kind of their week because they're returning from a show on Sunday. Monday's the maintenance day, Tuesday, Wednesday practice days, Thursdays they launch for the next show, and then at that point, Friday is usually your travel day home. So that gives you a good idea, kind of the show rotation of how it all works. You kind of see the interaction of just the whole kind of cycle in the life of the show season. So that's what I did. I was like mid-April of 2016, and just came out and I told Lacey, I was like, if I don't call you or talk to you, don't, it's because I'm like full focus on this, because I wanted to be the first one there and the last one to leave, and especially as going as a chief, because you got to meld well with your chief's mess, but the troops need to, they kind of need to see you and feel you out, because it's a team vote, if you ruffle the wrong feathers, then it's going to spread quickly. And there's been many a person that we've had to bring people in and say, hey, we heard about this, tell me about it, and you'll get the full story, or at least their story, and making the wrong impression is something that's definitely going to hurt you, So I wanted to make sure that I met everybody and, kind of saw everything start to finish in the day in the life of the Blues. So luckily, I was, I did my interview, and then I had to just forget it and focus on, the things I had going on back in Whidbey and just put it out of my mind. And it was like the most excruciating 2 months, 2.5 months, just waiting for that phone call.
So it was a phone call. That's how they let you know?
It was a phone call, yes. It's typically a phone call. And I'm like you said, you've seen the pilot one where it's kind of, they call you and usually they'll razz you a little bit, they'll tell you how, you did well, but you could have done better. And then, it's a very specific thing
that they say.
Yeah. So they didn't do that, but they did do the, that lead me on as if maybe I wasn't selected, but
toying with your heartstrings.
Well, and it's funny because my career counselor, so at the tail end of my tour at 132, I was the acting CMC. We actually had a CMC gap. So our command master chief left, and we weren't getting our next command master chief for about another 4 months. So I was the CMC. So I had a close working relationship with our career counselor. And so because I was getting really close to my PRD, every morning when our career counselor would log into the, I forget what it's called, but the detailing website, it used to be called JAS. I don't know if they call it that anymore, but anyway, CMS is what it was, CMS. But he would log in and there would be a big banner with my name, because it was like member is close to PRD but not under orders, so it was like this huge red flag, as a career counselor, you need to be pinging. So every day he would log in and the first thing would pop up is, hey, Senior Massicotte doesn't have orders, So one day he logs in and my name didn't pop up. And so he was like, huh. So he did a little digging and he saw that I was selected to NFDS. And so he didn't know any better, comes running into my office and was like, hey, Senior, congratulations. I've never shook a Blue Angel's hand before. And I just looked at him. I said, what in the hell are you talking about, NC1? And he's like, I saw your orders. And I'm like, what orders? He's like, you've been selected for the Blues. And I'm like, oh. So
from the mouths of babes.
Right. So I log into mine and I look at my profile, and sure enough, it was posted to that set of orders, but I had not gotten the phone call. And so I'm like, would they go to this length
to screw with you? No.
And that's what I'm thinking, though, because I didn't know how much pull they have, So I'm like, great. So I knew within a day or two, I was probably going to be getting a phone call. And sure enough, I did. And even knowing that I was in the system as showing posted when they were messing with me, my heart was sinking, because I'm like, I don't know at what level that they would go, you didn't know. But luckily, I was selected, and man, it was just what a great feeling. I called my mom, and she immediately started crying. So it made me cry. It was just an awesome day.
You're on the roller coaster after that.
Oh man, and what a ride! What a ride it
so
is.
Going back in time and space, you said this is 2016.
2016.
So 2017 being your first show season.
Correct. So
back then, still the classic Hornet, right?
Correct.
And you ended up, and I'll preview a little bit, and then we'll backtrack. You ended up seeing both the Hornet and the Super Hornet.
Correct.
So huge transition. It just occurred to me while we're talking about time. So I was an FRS student at HM15 in 2017. You guys did the Ypsilanti Air Show up in Michigan, September, October timeframe.
Yep.
I had never interacted with a Blue Angel before, more or less a maintainer. And our helicopter, because it's a 53 and it's always broken, somehow we managed to break something small. And I remember thinking we tried the local FBO, we tried a couple other places. I'm just a student. I'm just trying to help because we were up there for a cross country. And I remember very distinctly walking over to the Blues. There was a little hangar area that was set aside where y'all had some of your maintainers, and just thinking like, man, they've got, 6 Blue Jets they got to go get flying. They have way more important things to deal with, some random, O2. I think I was, a JG at the time. And whoever it was that I spoke with could not have been nicer, tried to lend us several tools. I don't think they'd been a prior 53 person, but they knew about the 53, walked out there with us, tried to help we had, like one Avi, one airframes, one power plant maintainer we brought with us, tried to help them out any way they could. I think we weren't able to get it, that specific thing fixed, but we got it close enough. But anyway, the impression I got was that everyone on that team, like you talked about, the selection process is pretty stringent for a reason, because it would have been no sweat off that person's nose to be like, yeah, man, sorry, we got stuff to do. Right. But instead it was like, hey, no, we're in the same uniform, right? Not the same uniform, but we're both in the Navy, right? And I'm going to help you out. So I was always very impressed by that. Also, that just being, like I said, my first interaction with anyone that wore the blue uniform, I guess you could say. Yeah,
that's a good story. I'm glad to hear that. And we got, I appreciate that. We got compliments like that all the time. And,
it was your folks at the time is the reason I mentioned that. Like that was the end, toward the end of that first season that you were on the team.
Yep.
So,
yep.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
What job did you, and I know I'm kind of jumping all around here, what job did you go into when you were hired onto the Blues? So
when I got there, I was the QAS. So I ran QA. It's supposed to be an E8 position, senior chief position. You'll see chiefs, E7s, and at some commands doing it, but you're in charge of the whole QA department. So it's pretty big deal. You've got mainly your most senior, usually your most senior E6s, first class petty officers, as the QARs, and they're the kind of the buck stops here. The last ones to look at things. So QA is required to see like flight control torques, and there's NAMP specific things that have to be looked at by QA. Just because of the severity if they're not done properly. So, and then you're managing all the audits. We have 40 some odd programs in the NAMP, which is our maintenance Bible that have to be audited periodically. So you're tracking all of that. You're doing monitors. You're just overall making sure that the quality, and in the fleet. I don't know if you've ever encounter this, but there's a lot of people think that the Blues are just like cowboys, and it's a wild west, and we throw the NAMP out the window, and that always kind of bugged me because we're supposed to be the best of the best, so we should be doing it better than anybody in the fleet. I mean, we should be representing not only the Navy as far as just how we look and how we perform, but also how we do our maintenance, and if it means it's a little bit harder to do, well, that's what we signed up for, and so I really tried to impress upon that, while I was there, that because we were getting ready for an AMI when I first took over, which is it's biannually. It's usually every 2 years you have an AMI inspection where CNAF, Naval Air Forces, comes out and inspects your programs and kind of digs a little deeper than what you would normally, and just kind of sees what's going on. And we proved that we could maintain, because our AMI was while we were in El Centro, and that's like our busiest time of the year. We're flying we're doing 4 sorties, that's the diamond solo, and then every other day is diamond solo, and then we call the 1456, where 1, 4, 5, and 6 go out and they perform delta maneuvers, because the solos are doing all their stuff and the diamonds doing their stuff, and so they need, at one point the solos have to kind of group up and do some of the delta maneuvering. So that's a tough schedule to keep that going 6 days a week. And then your only day off is Sunday, which you really have enough time to like do your laundry, grocery shop, and like stare at a wall and just like decompress. So to do an AMI while we're there too it throws a lot on the plate. But one of the good things about going to El Centro, and even the Thunderbirds have mentioned that they wish they'd kind of do this because they do all their winter training at home, where there's a lot more distractions. Us going to El Centro eliminates a lot of that distraction because we don't have kids, we don't have mama, we don't have all the things that are kind of pulling at us. We go there, we get focused. It's actually written into our what we call the 1610, which is like kind of our how to be a Blue Angel guide. It's written in there that you're not allowed to have any visitors until after halftime, which is typically mid-February. So that first 6 weeks while we're there, we're focused on building the team. No distractions. And then after halftime, that should be enough time for where then you can bring visitors. But it's just so that we can gel as an organization.
If you look to the past, even I think with one of the original, and I'm gonna butcher this, so I apologize in advance, but one of the original specifications, even just for folks to be on the team as a pilot, was you had to be a bachelor.
Oh, really?
Literally it was that level of, hey, we need you focused on,
right.
And I assume that was the reason why, but yeah, it's interesting that that's even written in there to that level. And you mentioned QA and working, quality assurance is so important, no matter where you are, but you are literally, and this is again, something that I as a naval aviator take a lot of pride in, that the Navy airplanes that are flying on the Blues are I don't want to say the trapped out jets, but the oldest jets at the time. I mean, there were not a lot of legacy jets in the fleet, period. The majority, I think, were on the Blues.
And what really limited us is, so that the Hornet has what's called lot numbers. So, every lot, is there's as the Hornet progresses, everything that they find, or as avionics advance, every lot gets better and better and better. And so, we flew what were like lot 7 to 11, which are, right now the Super is in like lot 35, 36, 37, something like that. So, there's been a lot of advancements. And the reason they do that is that's what all the flight testing is done. So to do the dynamic, aerodynamic flights on another lot aircraft, they have to go through because all those avionics changes, all the little airframes changes, all those little things have to be flight tested. So in order to keep that from happening, because it's a lot, it's got to go through Pax River, you got to get engineers involved. There's just a lot of things that have to happen to make that. You have to rewrite your mod instruction for. We were very limited to like lot 7, which 7, 8s, and 9s I'm pretty sure were Alpha Bravos, and then 10 and 11 were Charlie Deltas. So that's a very small percentage of the legacy fleet that we could even utilize. And then once you factor that in, then the ones that we're getting were typically ones that they've squeezed every ounce of fleet use out of them. So we had some airplanes that were like 9,000 flight hours on them, which they've been inspected. They're completely safe to fly, but they just came with a lot of inspections. So it was, and every aircraft was different because of the amount of FLE. Flight Limited Expenditure is what FLE stands for. So there's sensors on the airplane that as you're pulling G, it monitors and tracks how much G is put on there, and then certain areas have like a FLE limit. So when you get back from that flight, you download your maintenance card, and all that flight data is kind of crunched, and then they'll actually deduct or add to. It depends on which how you're tracking your FLE. But like the wing route is one, the wing at the wing fold, there's sensors. There's just kind of sensors all over that they're tracking. So theoretically, you could actually underfly flight hour wise, but overfly your FLE depending on how you're flying that airplane. So the goal is to try to match your flight hour with your FLE so that you're using it up, because you could have an airframe that could fly to 8,000, but at 6,000 hours you've overfleet it because you're putting too much G on it. So you'll see that a lot in the adversary squadrons where they're slicking the wings. They have no pylons. They're honking on them left and right. Putting a lot of G on them. You get to a point where they'll look and go, okay, that airplane, we need to put it somewhere else where it's not going to get that, because, there's still airframe hours we can get out of it. So we get the jets after they've already done all of that and then try to manage them to their bitter end, because they're not going anywhere else once they leave the Blues. They're typically either going to go, a lot of them went to the museum. some of the aircraft will go to like, sticks somewhere, be displays.
I think when the team sunned down the Legacy jets, I remember seeing one-offs and two-offs flying to different, museums across the country.
So the coolest one that I heard of is we flew into San Diego and they put it on a barge and it's going over to Pearl Harbor.
Really?
So that's where
awesome.
one of them's going. A couple of them went to Arizona, where there's the big mothball.
Davis Motham.
Davis Motham, yep. So a couple of them went there.
Like one in airport in North Carolina. I think there was a lot of hay made when they came in and put that airplane at the museum there.
Yep.
I had a friend that was there that day. So
Right.
they just went across the country.
Right, yep. They sporadically sent them, and that's really kind of a big deal. There's a lot of behind the scenes that kind of there's B&O managers and there's flea managers for us, and that made it really easy because they actually had an Excel program where I could put in a jet and if I flew it in the 5 spot for this many flight hours, I could see how many flight hours I had left before I would expend it. So what we would typically do is fly an aircraft in the diamond for a season, and then move that aircraft to the solos for the next season, and then back and forth, because the solos would put a lot of G on them versus the diamond. The diamond was actually not as aggressive.
It's kind of like, what is it? Any good movie where you see the pilot get in the jet and his name is on the side of it, it's just a sticker, right? You don't just fly with the airplane that has your name on it.
Yep.
Same thing with the Blues. It's a big sticker, right?
It
You
is
literally
it's a big vinyl sticker. So we can make any, like BUNO, which is our, the aircraft serial number, that's actually painted on. So when you see that BUNO, that is painted on, that is that aircraft. But the big number on the tail, I could make that whatever number I wanted. So, and that was, we did for a lot of like celebrities, or, when an admiral comes in town, we'd have our paint shop who does all the stencilings. They have a machine that can spit out anything. We'd put their name. That's always like a big crowd pleaser when you put someone's name on the side of the airplane like that. So we would typically do that for the incentive flights for the crew, put their name on it. So all the pictures, they, have their name on the side. So it's a good deal.
What other things were special? Because obviously the airplane doesn't have a gun anymore.
So the gun is replaced with the smoke tank.
It is a smoke tank. Okay.
Yep. So the smoke tank replaces where the gun is. So
how big of a tank is it?
It's about a 60-gallon tank, 90-gallon. I think it's 90-gallon.
I have a 6-gallon tank that I'm trying to put in my airplane of smoke, so a lot less than you guys have.
Yes, yes. And they're thirsty too. Like they'll, we'll get those 55-gallon drums. And that will, I can't remember how many we get per show. I want to say it's like 28 of those. And we go through them, there's a requirement for a whole weekend, it's all in our operations manual. So,
I've actually read it. It's actually a lot of, I say a lot. You're supporting a squadron of F-18s for 4 days essentially, and
yes.
people, and a C-130.
Right.
There's rental cars, there's, hotel rooms, there's a lot of resources, there's food. It makes sense though when you think about it. You guys don't have time to hunt this stuff down on yourself.
No,
you go to a show site.
I mean, from the moment we land, it's all luck of the draw. You could land, and if the jets are all good, it's and life is good. But if there's maintenance or whatnot, you're absolutely right. We don't have time to in this day, it's a lot easier. Back in the day when you didn't have like a GPS right in your pocket with your phone, you didn't know where food was. You didn't know where, so a lot of it's written towards that. Like we show up and we have to ensure that we have no distractions so we can fix airplanes and ensure, because we're still, as far as I know, we have never missed an air show due to maintenance, so that's something that maintainers really pride themselves on, that, we've always ensured that we've had enough airplanes to perform a demonstration, so there's been, demonstrations canceled for weather, or, if I know there was one, my first year where boss actually got sick. So, and if boss is sick, it's not safe to go in the air. So stuff like that happens. But as far as maintenance, we have always provided the assets to perform the demonstration. So
that happens on the backs of the maintainers. A lot of hard work to make that happen.
So that's what a lot of that support manual is to make sure that we have all the support equipment, water, we have food, we have the things that we need, so that when we show up, we can just rock. We can do exactly what we need to do. So.
I jumped away from it. I want to get back to it. We talked about the smoke system, so that's in the nose of the jet,
yep.
right? What other modifications from just a Fleet Hornet?
So it's a different software it's in the flight control computers, and so there's some reasons that they do that. There's a couple of inhibits that they put on certain warnings that you would normally get, just because it would be a distraction. and there's a stopwatch that's put in. So there's some cockpit stuff that's kind of the same but different. So
it's a mechanical stopwatch, right?
It is, but they have to put the mounts in there, for that. Then the wiring in the cockpit for some of the weapons systems are converted into the fuel management stuff. So because of the inverted flight, they have the inverted fuel pumps. Those inverted fuel pumps, they still, even though they're inverted and they can pump fuel, there's still like a time frame, and there's pressures and whatnot. So they've actually converted like what's called the shoot strobe, which is like a little strobe that's so if you have a lock with a certain missile, it's so you don't have to look down to know you have a lock. It just will flash at you, letting you know you've got a lock, so you can shoot the missile. They actually convert that into a light that'll indicate if you don't have the proper fuel pressure. So if that's going off, you shouldn't be doing inverted maneuvers. So there's some cockpit modifications as far as that goes. Obviously, they have to run all the piping for the smoke system, but that's really about it. There was on the Legacy, there was a different aileron servo that was put in, but for the most part, it was it's the biggest thing is like routing all that piping for the smoke system. The software changes that happen, a little bit of cockpit modification, and the paint is a big one, like stripping them down. That was what would hurt a lot of the modifications, was they'd strip it down, and there was actually one where somebody had like literally bondoed on the canopy wall just below there was like a hole, and instead of like fixing it properly, they just bondoed it over, and when they stripped it down, they discovered that. So it was like, oh my gosh. So they had to fix that and fix it properly, and so it was always, I wouldn't say fun, it was very stressful to watch the process of getting new airplanes to us, new to us, basically.
What's it like being on the road with the team? I feel like it's a lot of hard work, like you talked about getting spun up. You're at El Centro, that first show at China. Actually, let's talk about China Lake, that first show, and then kind of the show season after that.
Well, that was an interesting show. So we did not have Fat Albert. So I could tell you like what's supposed to happen, and then my experience. What's supposed to happen is you're supposed to have Bert, and everything's great. Everything works great when you have Bert. Because you can fly the entire team that needs to be on the road. You can fly your tools, parts, and materials. Bert kind of carries everything. So you can land, you offload what's called the show load. The show load has all your parts, it has all your necessary equipment and tools, and the show load has spots where you put all your luggage, and so everything is like organized. There's a whole system. So typically what'll happen is you show up in the morning. You load up Bert, actually they'll put all the show load and stuff on the day before, but you load up all your hard packs and everything gets on there. And then when the M's, the Marine pilots say, yep, hey, we're good, pre-op's good, everything, there's a position on the team called the front man, who the front man is kind of like the shop, or not the shop, the command LPO. So, if front man makes a radio call like, hey, everybody make your way to Bert, even St. Tree Mascot needs to make their way to Bert. So, and as you're getting on Bert, he's checking everybody off, and once we're all loaded up, Bert takes off, and typically you have enough back home to kind of launch them, because Bert will always, I won't say always, is typically going to be leaving before the pilots do, just because we need to get there and get set up. So the day prior, 7 and 7 Geek will leave to the air show. And 7 and 7 Geek are the ones that are kind of pre-staging all the stuff. So 7 will arrive. He'll kind of do his media flights. And 7 Geek is the 7 crew chief. So they affectionately call him the 7 Geek. He's there in between the media flights and everything, putting stickers. So we have stickers for every car. So there's a sticker that'll say boss. There's a sticker that'll say 2 and 3. There's a sticker that says 3 and 4. Like everybody has their vehicles. Everybody has their room keys. Like he divvies out whose room key is what. I mean, it's a pretty important job. There's a lot that rests on 7 Geek. He's got to make sure all the support equipment, like per the support manual, is there. He's getting all the info as to like Hey, here's the maintenance hangar. Here's where all the bathrooms are. Here's where the water is. If you need a smoke, there's where the smoke pit is. This is what kind of fuel they're putting in. This is, he's got the whole, everything that we need, because as soon as Bert lands, then we all muster up, and he gives us the whole brief on everything. Basically, everything I rattled off, he's going to rattle off real quick. And then we just get everything kind of in place. We get our cars figured out. We get all our luggage loaded on, and then we just wait for the Delta to arrive. And so then once the Delta arrives, then it's go time. Because on a Thursday, it's a CNA day. It's a long day. Because you typically would muster around 5 in the morning, 5, 6 in the morning. And then the team would normally, the Delta would show up probably around 10, 11. And then we have to do what's called CNAs, which is circles and arrivals. So as soon as they land, you're gassing them up, doing a turnaround inspection, getting them released so that they can walk and do their circles and arrivals. So what that is the team, before every air show, they get imagery, like satellite imagery. And they're looking at like, okay, that looks like a good waypoint for this. And, like over the imagery, they've got, like a circle and then all the different kind of waypoints that they use, that they would fly and use as different references. So then they go up and fly to make sure that those are still there, because sometimes that imagery is a year old, sometimes it's not accurate, sometimes there's a pole that's popped up that wasn't there. So they're just making sure that everything looks like it's supposed to, or and if it doesn't, what are they going to use instead? They land, and then they'll hopefully all the jets will be good, and then they'll do a practice show based on all those kind of new waypoints and everything that they're using. And so then after that practice show, that's it for the Thursday. Knock on wood that everything is up. And then we have to redo all the inspections, because there's a daily inspection, there's a turnaround inspection. All that stuff has to be kind of redone. And if everything is good and we have no discrepancies, then we can go home, which is, even on a good day, I don't think I've ever made it to the hotel before like 7 at night, so you're talking 12, 14-hour days, in that range. If things don't go well, and there's, what we'll typically do is figure out exactly who we need to stay, and then we identify another crew. So that was something that we implemented, and I don't, whether they're doing it the same now is kind of that team's decision, but our decision was there was a mindset of like, if we just work 24 hours, then that would be fine. But I felt like we were, you get to a point where you're not effective. When you start getting into that 14, 16, 20-hour range, you're just not effective. Sometimes a discrepancy that's kicking your butt, if you just went home and got even 6 hours of sleep and you come in the next morning, 9 times out of 10, it's like with a fresh set of eyes, you're like, oh, it was this the whole time, and life would be good. So we would identify a crew that would stay, and then a backup crew if we needed them in the morning. So that way we weren't kind of running, people to, both ends basically, because that makes for a long, long day if you're just working. We've had to do it. There was a couple air shows my first year where, there was one, Milwaukee, I probably was in my hotel room for 4 hours that whole weekend because of just how many maintenance issues that we had. So sometimes there's no avoiding it. It's just the way it's got to be. But I felt like we tried to make the best decisions to ensure that we didn't have to, unless we had no other options.
But you mentioned that season there was an issue with Fat Albert, right? Because as I recall, when I saw the team in Ypsilanti, you guys had a C-40 that brought you up there.
Well, yeah. So I want to say Ypsilanti was probably part of the Seattle long, which typically on our long trips we will normally have a C-40 because we're taking more maintainers. So a normal rotation of air shows would be we leave Pensacola and go to wherever the show site is, do the show, and return to Pensacola and get ready for the next one and just rinse, repeat that. But there's a couple, like there's the usually for the Annapolis flyover, it's a long show, quote unquote, a long trip, West Coast long, Seattle long, so you hear them call the longs. And what that is we'll leave and go to Ypsilanti, and then typically there's like, I think from Ypsilanti they went to Idaho, and then from Idaho did Seattle, and then came back to Pensacola. So because of that, we'll bring more maintainers so that you can kind of rotate people through. So, and there is only a certain amount of people you can fly on BERT, period, dot. It only has so many seats. So for the long trips, we'll typically use a C-40. Now, if that wasn't part of the long, which I thought it was, we were using a lot of C-40s that trip or that season because we did not have BERT. So BERT in Alaska of 2016, there was an inspection that was supposed to be done, and it looked like there was enough flight hours on BERT, I guess, to not do that inspection. But there was something came up, and they were like, yeah, we need to recalculate this. And they kind of did a recalculation, like, I think we need to do this inspection now. And when they did, they found cracks in the rainbow fittings where the wings are attached at the wing. I'm not a C-130 guy, so if I'm misquoting this, but essentially there was cracks where there shouldn't be, is the bottom line. So BERT was out mid-2016. And they got a one-time flight to fly it to, I think, Utah. There's a big C-130 base, and they were able to do the maintenance, but we were pretty much without BERT for most of 2017.
And Fat Albert is not like a F-18. It's not like you have a backup. There is one C-130.
So we have BERT, and then typically we have a reserve squadron out of New Orleans that can lend some support, and there's a Marine squadron out of New York, out of Stewart. But they're hard to, it's hard to coordinate that at last minute. But whenever there's a gray C-130, we'll call it Ernie. So we have BERT, and then we have Ernie. So you'll see sometimes you'll say, BERT's down, but we've got Ernie coming, So, but because it was such a prolonged period, nobody could provide an asset for that long, And I guess there's a little bit of contention. The BERT is a Marine airframe. It's a Marine run, shop, piloted, that thing. And word on the street is the Marines just don't see the benefit of putting that kind of money into that asset. When you're talking numbers, it's hard to state, okay, yeah, you don't see anything now, but 18 years from now, that kid that saw that air show is going to join the Marines. Like, how do you quantify that? How do you? So it's kind of an area of contention of why are we supporting this? So it's what I've been told. I don't know if that's true or not, but it did seem to kind of pan out a little bit because there was always like resistance in getting us the support we needed when BERT was down, and then even to get the new BERT, that was a big kind of fiasco. I'm glad it all worked out that they have that new J model because, life is good when you have BERT. You don't realize how much of an asset that is until you have to figure out what to do without it,
And the airplane they're flying now, the current BERT, the J model you're talking about, actually came from the UK. So that wasn't even a U.S. aircraft originally.
Correct.
It was a foreign military sale that I guess came back across the pond and got a lot of TLC over in the UK. As I recall, they painted it over there and did a lot of mod work. And
there was a lot of behind the scenes of like, what's the paint? Like what kind of paint do we need for this? And we're like, So there was a lot of things back and forth as to how to get that. And I love that new paint scheme that they have on it.
Oh, yeah, it looks good.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, BERT is a necessary asset for the team. It just, because when you don't have BERT, then that show load I was talking about, all the tools part, you have to truck that. And, truckers are not very, like they're strapping it down and cinching it as hard as they can. And so we were having parts of the show load that were like, getting gouged and cracked, and parts that were like falling off, things would be missing. It just is, it's a mess. And then now you've got to also figure out how you're going to get the crew to where you're going. So it probably was a C-40. Again, if that wasn't a part of the long trip, which that's kind of normal, then it was because we had to rely on the C-40s. And here's the thing with the C-40. Our rotation is, like I said, Thursday morning is when we go. Well, guess what? The C-40 request came back, but they've got to leave Wednesday. So now you're having to leave a day early, Sounds easy, but there's not any hotel rooms because they've got you booked from Thursday to Sunday, not Wednesday. So, it's just, the rental cars aren't ready. There's all these things, it seems like, we'll just fly up on Wednesday. What's the big deal? Well, it's a huge deal because now a bunch of people have to figure out where is everybody going to be housed? How are we going to get around? What does that look like on the back end of the team that's got to get all the aircraft ready? What the team has just enough people to do what they need to do on the days they need to do them. So, if you're sending half the team away on a day that they're supposed to be there, it just makes things more difficult. So, and that was the life I lived. I for the 3 years that I did the show season, we probably only had Bert for maybe 10 to 12 shows. Total.
That's not much at all.
No, so we got Bert back, and then after that cracked rainbow fitting, and we had Bert for, they had to get their qualifications back up, fly a couple demonstrations kind of off, and make sure that they were able to do that. And everything was good. I think we did. They unveiled Bert's return at the Pensacola beach show. Bert flew that show, and I think like two or three others after that. And then it was something that happened with C-130s that had nothing to do with Bert, but affected Bert. There was that Marine C-130 that crashed violently, just basically fell out of the sky. And when they walked everything back, they found that the propeller corroded. And that corroded propeller came loose in flight, came apart, severed the, basically severed the fuselage. And, they had no chance. Walking everything back, they found that there was a major quality defect in where all the propellers were coming from, and that major defect affected us. We had 3 of the 4 Bert propellers were affected. So Bert was downed at that point. The one good propeller we had to ship off because they were basically, racking and stacking who's the most important that needs propellers now. And so Bert was without propellers for a good portion of the remainder of 17 into 18. And then once we got Bert back, there was, again, we flew at a couple air shows, and then they came out with a new calculation for the flea that I was talking about, like on the Hornet. It's the same but different. There's a life limiting calculation. And they kind of said, hey, we need to redo these numbers. And when they redid the numbers, they were like, basically this airframe is at its limit. So very suddenly they're like, no more Bert. And so that happened, I think, late 2018. And so 2019, we were without Bert pretty much that whole season. And that was when the negotiations of getting the J model were. Most of my time on the Blues was without Bert. And it really hurt because when you had Bert, it's like, this is how it's supposed to be. This is why she's here. And, it just made life a lot more difficult than it needed to be. But
was the first time you felt that first show at China Lake?
So, well, again, we didn't have Bert for that show.
And that's what I mean. Was that the first time you felt, hey, this is, we're I'm not going to say uncharted territory, but,
Well, I didn't know what I didn't know. This is my first, you know what I mean?
Fair enough, yeah.
So this is my first air show,
yeah.
What I mean? It's just, and I've got some cool stuff I could show you from that show, because we actually flew home on a KC-10. And then the boom operators let us go back there and watch, because they were tanking the Delta all the way home. So we got to wave at them as they were hitting the tanker, and they flew the Delta right underneath. Once they got their last sips of gas and over Texas, and they had enough to push to Pensacola, they just said, see ya. And they flew right underneath. So we were back there, in the little window where the boom operator is, and the Delta just flies right underneath with their smoke on and pushed on to Pensacola. So that's how we came home, was in a KC-10 from that one. So I never had that experience.
Cool memory for sure.
Yeah.
So one of the neat traditions, and I'll be honest, maybe I'm not a true Blue Angels fan because I don't know this, but one of the things that I don't know how long it's been going on, I guess I should say, is Smoke in the Beach. So this past weekend, I was fortunate to do some aerial photography with some good friends here in the Pensacola area. And the whole time we were doing it, we only had one radio in the airplane. And we would constantly monitor back on Pensacola approach, listening to make sure we knew when the blues came home. Because we were at about 1,000 feet flying the beach line, and I think they're significantly lower than that when they come home. But we just wanted to stay out of the way. But all that to mention, that is a really cool way. I've been at the apartment, so I live out the back gate of NAS Pensacola. And it might be 7 p.m. on a Sunday night. It might be, I don't know, I think that's usually about as early as you'll hear it, maybe sometimes later in the night. But you'll hear the roar of the Diamond come back in, close tower ops. They'll pitch out and land. But they'll do that after coming right down the middle of Pensacola, going all the way out to Portofino, flying the beach kind of toward Gulf Shores, and then recovering it back into Pensacola. The team is home, and it's kind of a neat thing. But maybe I've missed it because I'm not a local here. I don't know that they've always done that. Is that something that they've always done when you were on the team?
So it's something we've always done. The biggest factor as to when and why and all that is really where they're at, when they're coming home, sunset. They're up against so many things. The route that they're going, weather. I mean, there's just a lot of factors. I know that 2018, 2019 with Boss Doyle, he was kind of adamant about if there's an opportunity, we're going to do it. You know what I mean? So
I feel like that's when I heard it picked up. That's the reason why it kind of became a thing, and I think the team still does it now.
So yes, that's something that I think that they're trying to just keep that mantra. Like if there's an opportunity, they want to do it. And just some of the behind the scenes, we got a lot of flack for that because if they flew a high show, they would need to have smoke oil put back in them to do a beach run. So now, you're just adding more maintenance stuff on the tail end of it. So that was always the gripe from the power plant shop who has to fill the smoke oil tanks is like, hey, we're done. At the last show of this air show, why are we worried about filling them back up with smoke oil? Because the contraption that they use to put it's a kind of a monstrosity of there's a big tube, and they have to have like a little generator that powers this kind of pump that pumps it in, and it's just you get messy, you get that smoke oil all over you. So there was some pushback from the crew that didn't want to. They're just like focused on getting everything broken down, because once they launch for that air show, should be load BERT, like not keep things out. It's like load BERT, get everything turned in. We're doing all these things to get ready to just leave town. So just throwing another maintenance thing on the plate is, it's a valid concern.
Something I would have never considered in a million years.
Right.
I just know that we as locals here in Pensacola love it, and it's kind of a neat way to, know that everyone's back home.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we would always say. Listen, it's it may be a little extra work, but there's a whole community that just truly appreciates that, and there's just such a sense of just Pensacola pride when that happens. So it's a big deal. It's one of those things that I think it may be a little bit of extra effort, but again, we're the best of the best. We're going to do everything a little bit better. If it takes a little extra steps on our part, and that's what we need to do. But it's easy to say that when you're not the one doing it, and so that's always the rub is like, okay, well then you get out there and drive the forklift over, and it's like, I get it. There's some extra steps that are involved, but I think it's a tradition. It's probably going to continue. It's really a boss call, I think, so I'm sure from boss to boss, they're going to say, hey, this is, it's, the community loves it, like it's fun to do. I'm sure, every time you come home, especially on some of the sunsets we get around here, I'm sure it's just like you probably as a pilot, you kind of like every weekend you get to kind of reappreciate like what you're doing, when you get to come home and do that. So it's funny because a buddy of mine, he fishes all the time, and so he's always on the beach, and he's like, hey man, what time, and he always got a lot of kudos because everybody just thought he was like the Blue Angel guru, because he's gonna be like, yep, 5:20, they're gonna be here, and 5:20, and everybody was like, how do you know, man? How do you know? like he had the insight. I was always feeding him the info, so he lost that little hookup once I left the team. So
okay, Chris, take us around the country with you. I'm sure they always say it's like picking children. There's no of your children, none of them is, there's no one's a favorite. There's you love them all equally. So I won't ask you to pick a favorite show or show site, but maybe what are some of the ones that stick out?
I'll tell you my favorite show.
Oh, you have a favorite? Okay, well don't let me put words in your mouth.
It's my favorite because it was the sleeper show of 2018. Nobody wanted to go there, and so like very few people. Well, obviously we had enough to make it, but like nobody was like really thinking that Owensboro, Kentucky was going to be a really good show. But what nobody knew is it's a remote show, which is always a good deal. So a remote show is where we take off from an airport that's off-site, and then typically like so Pensacola Beach is a remote show because they're flying out of NAS Pensacola, but the show is over at Pensacola Beach. The reason that's awesome is because whenever there's an air show, we always have to go in and do our morning turns 3 hours prior to the show start. So if the show start is at 9, we have to be in there at 6 to do morning turns. So like on a Friday night, you got to cut your night short because you got to be in at 6 in the morning. At a remote show, if we're flying at 3, we need to be there at noon. So it just gives you an opportunity, like if you get out late on a Friday, because of maintenance, still gives you time in the morning to go maybe see some stuff and, enjoy the city that you're in and then go. And so nobody knew it was a remote show until the day before we were supposed to go. And then I found out from video because they're like, hey, Senior, is this a remote show? I'm hearing that we need to bring our ComCart gear, which is like, we wear polos and shorts. It's like a different uniform that we wear for that, which, that's another good thing too, is you just wear a kind of a different, more relaxed outfit. And I'm like, news to me, like it's not marked as a remote show. I come to find out when we did our little brief for the show, it is a remote show. So we're like, yes, it just makes it so much better. So then coupled with the fact that our hotel was like right on the river where the air show was, and you could literally walk out the doors of the hotel and there was a VFW right there. And like we walked in there and I tried to pay for a drink. I put like $40 down and just said, this is to cover my tab. And every time the waitress was like, nope, it's covered. Nope, it's covered. You just could not. And it was just great atmosphere. You're in the middle of the country that just, got a lot of patriotism, a lot of pride, just love the military. I mean, it was just a really good air show. So Owensboro, Kentucky, sleeper show of 2018. That was probably one of the best shows. But you were going to ask, like, where have I traveled to?
Yeah, I just want to kind of put some dots on the map. Far away, did you ever get to do Hawaii, Alaska?
No, so they're actually in Hawaii right now. And they did Seattle last week, and from Seattle they went to Hawaii, which is the first time since, I think, 2016. So good that they're getting back out there. I know the Hawaii thing, there was a lot of just pros and cons, a lot of cons. It's a lot to get all that equipment out to Hawaii. It's a lot on the air crew to fly all the way out to Hawaii. It's a lot to get out there. And then to couple that with, I looked at the schedule. They're coming back from Hawaii, going right to Chicago. There's no break. So there's a lot of concern of just the fatigue that puts on them over the course of that amount of flying. So, it is what it is. The show schedule gets approved, and that's what it is. You have to make it work. But I never did Alaska either. That's a show that I wanted to do, but we didn't go to Alaska.
San Francisco, I think that's kind of the real
So I did San
one.
Francisco, and again, that's a remote show because we fly out of Oakland. So my first year, I was on the maintenance side, so I was over in Oakland. And funny story, I was like, well, I'm going to, we were in Emeryville is where we stayed, which Emeryville is, if you look at a map, like Berkeley's right there. It looks like it should be a okay area. I told myself, I'll walk to a BART station. There's like 2 blocks away. There's a BART station. I'll hop on the BART. I'll go down to downtown, San Francisco, and I'll go see the sights. I got about a block away from the hotel, and I instantly realized that it was a bad choice, that I should not have done that. So, but, live and learn, I guess, I just put my tough guy face on and just, acted like I knew what I was doing and, that I've lived there my whole life and everything was fine. But you know, that comes with the territory.
What other good memories, other good shows that you enjoyed doing?
Man, there are so many. Like, where do you start? You know, I mean, I don't know which one trumps. I'll tell you, one of the most memorable ones was 4th of July 2019. So 4th of July 2019 was when Trump did his, like that big kind of salute to the troops, and he talked about each branch, and then there was like a flyover of every, you know, like here's, you know, Coast Guard, and there was a Coast Guard flyover, and they talked Army, and there was like a helicopter flyover. So that show, we were that weekend we were supposed to be in Kansas City, and we were in Kansas City, but Trump wanted the Blue Angel. He was a big Blue Angel fan, so there was a couple times he landed in Pensacola here, and he'd always want to go see the Blues. So there's some good photos of, like, you know, Secret Service with the Blue Angel jets, and, you know, I think there's one of the team at that time with Trump, and so he was a avid supporter, because he did the Salute America. In 2020, when COVID happened, there was like a Salute America or
a series of flyovers across the
it was
country.
A series of flyovers. I forget what they referred to it as, but, you know, there was another one that the Blues did over Mount Rushmore. Again, I was told that was like direct tasking from Trump. He wanted the Blues there. So anyway, 2019, we're in Kansas City, but he wanted us on the flyover. So that was Thursday, was 4th of July. So that's supposed to be our arrival day, CNAs, all that kind of stuff. So basically we're told we need to figure this out. So the fix was we flew up on Tuesday, and then did our CNAs and our practice day on Wednesday, which was the 3rd, and then got everything ready for the flyover on the 4th from Kansas City. So this is like a true testament of the team right here, because we were basically tri-sided. So what we did was we sent a team of personnel to go up to D.C. to Andrews Air Force Base and basically be like a quick support, hopefully quick fix crew if anything needed. They were supposed to gas them, because there was going to be a tanker that drug them. They were going to land, gas up, and then basically have enough to just circle and meet that TOT, you know, of when they wanted them to do that flyover. And then so we had also we needed to launch an airborne spare in case there was another. So we had there was a pilot who was a previous Blue, and he did a lot of the behind the scenes for the Super Hornet transition. He took an aircraft from Pensacola and flew it up there. So we had a crew in Pensacola launching him. We had the crew in D.C. that was getting ready. And then we had the crew that was in Kansas City that was getting the Delta to go. So Thursday morning, get out there. It is pretty much like it is right now, just miserably drizzly, just rainy, gross day. And you know, we're like, hey, it is what it is. We got to launch them. They have a, you know, tanker, you know, they got to meet, you know, and everything's coordinated. Got to get them. So we get out there. We're in our rain gear and everything. Launch them. Delta gets airborne. We're all high-fiving. It's just like now we're trying to figure out where we're going to go and like watch this whole thing. And then on the radio, we can kind of hear one of them has a generator issue. Like, oh, man. So they had been airborne and were pushing probably for about 10 minutes. And then we, you know, just getting bits and pieces on the scanner, and we're like, we know that there's an issue. So sure enough, one of them had a generator problem, and so they decided to turn him around and possibly use the airborne spare if that was what was going to be necessary. Well, he lands, we put him in the spare, and he's like, I'm going. I'm trying. So he's trying to get in touch with the tanker and trying to figure out where their rendezvous point is and everything. And I mean, it was just a mess, because you know, they were on a flight plan with that group going to DC, and you can't just hop in and be a separate without, like, you know, there's all sorts of red tape you got to get through to file that flight plan.
Not even to mention the fact you're going into probably the most protected airspace in the entire country.
Right. So it was a lot of stuff going on. So he was probably about an hour behind by the time he finally got airborne. So he's able to rendezvous, and they land in Andrews, and they're in lightning within 5 because there was thunderstorms in the area. So if you've ever been on an Air Force base and ever been in lightning in 5, nobody does anything, not even if you're the Blue Angels. So the chief that was up there, she was like, just begging them, like, just get fuel in these airplanes. We need to get them gassed up because, like, this whole thing is, you know, like, the time's a ticking. Like, Trump had already started the speech that they were supposed to be, you know. So this was like a big deal. So they're just like, you know, trying to figure out how they're going to get gassed up. I'm sure probably boss made some calls to, you know, somehow finally a fuel truck arrives. They get them gassed up. And then they were able to make. I'll show you after this the picture of them over the Lincoln Memorial doing the breakout. Just an amazing thing. I still get, like, watching that. I was like just so proud to be a part of it, you know, because here we are. It's 4th of July. Just that speech that Trump did, whether you like him or hate him or whatever, that was an amazing speech. I think it really captured the essence of the American fighting spirit and just what we were doing, what we were about. And the fact that we were able to launch a spare from Pensacola, put a crew in Washington, D.C., launch them from Kansas City to go up there and to do that flyover, return, and then fly an entire air show Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You couldn't ask that of any other squadron, in my opinion. You know, at least without manning them you wouldn't get that out of the 120 people that were on that team. You know, it had to be the Blues to do that.
Exactly, and I think you're absolutely right. That's exactly what the Blue Angels, you know, personify, and I think that's such a great example because what we, you know, I say we, I remember seeing it on TV, right? But I saw 6 blue airplanes fly over, and on time, on target, and it looked great.
Yeah.
Because that's just what you expect,
right?
You just expect that of the Blue Angels, but you don't see all the behind the scenes, all the hard work. Like that was just dealing with the Air Force in general is a Herculean effort. That whole thing, not even just to mention getting out of Andrews and getting airborne that day, that whole process, absolutely incredible, but no one knows the behind-the-scenes side of it. And the next thing I want to ask you about is all those are people you worked with. And I'm not talking about the pilots, I'm talking about the maintainers specifically. When you talk about the Blues very competitively select for who they want to be on the team, I'm guessing it's probably the best and brightest in the airframe shop and the power plant shop and all the different shops, life support. What's it like to work with a squadron of basically the best? I'm not saying that our sailors out there aren't the best, but when you're handpicking and cherry picking and then putting them all in one place, I imagine it's got to be a special thing.
It's a leadership challenge because everybody comes with an ego. You know, when you're getting the best of the best, you know, you're getting people's evals are, hey, this is our number one guy, you know, and everybody's a number one, right? So that's on the team. All their evals are glowing. All of their maintenance is, you know, top notch. So there's a lot of ego that if you don't have the right leadership style for that, I think that's probably one of the hardest places to go. I mean, nothing against the pilots, but they're there to fly, right? So that they're really focused on that, and they don't get a lot of they get interaction with the troops, but it's not like a DeVoe, you know, level leadership that you would in a fleet squadron. You know, so it's really the chief's mess that has to be the glue to kind of hold that team together. And I've seen a lot of good chiefs that were, you know, had great evals in the fleet, but got there and could not figure it out. Couldn't figure out the puzzle pieces to make that place work because, you know, there's not only does the first classes and the second classes and all, they have to humble themselves a little bit because they're coming with their big egos. You as a chief have to come and humble yourself a little bit too. You may be an expert out in the fleet of all things, but you're not an expert of the Blue Angels, you know, and we do a lot of, you know, everything is by the book. We follow an app, all that, but we don't go to show sites every weekend, you know. So there's a point to where you're going to have to humble yourself and ask a second class, what are we doing here? What is this about? You know, you have to kind of. So I saw a lot of chiefs just not do well there. You know, we actually had to let one go because of just the whole leadership and just gelling with the team and the whole. Just the way that everything went down, you know, so I think that's kind of when you ask about working with that caliber team, it takes a unique individual to be, you know, to kind of lead it, you know, to do well there as far as that goes. To work with them is great, but there is a lot of behind the scenes stuff that, you know, people. There's fallouts. There's differences of opinions. No one wants to back down because they're, you know, everybody's an A-type personality there. So that it's kind of a tough thing at times. It can be really great when it's working, but when it's not working, then, or when we were really good when we were doing the same thing over and over again. What we didn't do well was when there was any kind of thing different thrown our way. So, you could always, I'd said many a maintenance meeting, like, hey, this is different. Like, start thinking about what could happen, because this is not in our normal routine. And that's true of any squadron, right? But I mean, it was even more so there, because you just get so accustomed to how we do things day in and day out, that if there's anything that messes with that balance, it can spiral out of control really quickly.
This might sound cheesy, and probably because I'm talking to you, and you lived in this world. You were someone who worked incredibly hard to keep those airplanes up. The flying is awesome. It truly is. That's what everyone thinks of. But I don't know. I own my own airplane. I'm very fortunate. My brother and I get to share it. You and I have actually gone to fly the beach together. Had a great time doing that. Being an owner, I have such an appreciation for maintenance and a maintainer that you can trust. And then honestly, from an owner perspective, someone that's not going to take you to the cleaners with money, right? Like, you want someone that's, a good price, but really more importantly than that, your life rests in their hands. Right. There is a tremendous amount of trust that goes into the person that you select to keep your craft in just the best of shape. Because I like to say, the people I love go flying with me in that right seat. Not that we don't love each other, but I take my wife, my brother and I are owners in the airplane, right? I've taken my mom flying, tons of people flying. Right. That trust that's there, I don't know. I guess the question I'm kind of alluding to, or trying to point in that direction. These are incredibly powerful machines. There's ejection seats. When things go wrong, they go wrong, dramatically, I guess is the right way to say it. What is it you're looking for? Because you, as I understand it, you help, you get to choose the next set of people that come after you. You guys as a team decide on, I don't know if it's a vote, but basically you have a hand in the process of choosing the people that replace you. Mm-hmm. What was it you were looking for in a maintainer, and those people that were out in the fleet? Yeah, their evals are glowing. Sure, the paperwork is nice. But when they came out for the interviews and you were essentially, they were auditioning to be a part of your team, what would you look for in those individuals to trust them to be the next generation of Blue Angels? So
one of the unique things about being on the Blues was we got a lot of specialized training, and one of the things, and I really appreciated this, was we had a guy come in and he taught how to do an interview, and it was he brought up a lot of good points that I really took on board. So before, I just would ask kind of random questions off the wall, but he was like, no, you need to have like 5 questions you're going to ask every person you interview, because if you ask different questions, what's your grading criteria? So it seems kind of counterintuitive. It seems like that should be obvious now, but when you're not really thinking about it, you're like. But then the other thing that he taught and harped upon was, this is their interview. So if you're doing all the talking, that's not an interview. So you need to do thought-provoking questions that are not, and you have to think about, like, it's not like, what do you bring to the team? What information are you going to get from that? You're not going to get anything. So, because they can blow smoke up your butt all day. Oh, I'm the greatest, so I'll bring this. No, you have to kind of frame it and phrase it as, hey, here at the Blues, we're a highly skilled, highly functioning team. Tell me about a highly skilled, highly functioning team that you were a part of, and how did you contribute? Now you're getting them to think of a specific scenario. And it's amazing when you frame questions that way, and you really, dug into questions in that regard, that it would floor a lot of people because they're not ready for that type of question. And now they really have to think. So I think in just interviewing people, the way you phrase the questions, you'd almost, I wouldn't say you would instantly, but you would get a good read by that because of how you frame the question and how they respond to it. And especially if you ask that same question to everybody that I'd interview, you would know right then and there, like, hey, based on that answer, this person seems to me to have a better head on their shoulders, a better understanding of things versus how this person understands. There was some other key indicators though too. There was a lot of people that would, ask like, how much time off do we get? So there was some people would kind of shoot themselves in the foot because you could get a read that one of the, and it actually kind of got held against me because I'm from Fort Walton Beach. So a lot of people want to just come back to this area, so you really have to be careful of that, because there's people that just want to, hey, I want to go to Pensacola. I can't get orders to the schoolhouse. Let me try the Blues. And that's bad. That is absolutely the wrong mentality, because you will fail. If that's, again, you can put on the smoke screen for a little bit, but once you get here, and if that was your driving factor, guess what? The Pensacola that you sought to get back to, you're not going to see it very much, because you're on the road. You're going to be doing a lot of things. There's going to be a lot of time that you're at work. So those were some other key indicators of like, I don't think this person's in it for the right reasons, So, but it's a small Navy too. You'd get a lot of feedback from, like, hey, so-and-so's from VFA 146. I know their chief, give them a call. There's a lot of that stuff that goes on, and kind of get a true depiction of the sailor, because I can read a package, I can read the interview sheets, I can, but sometimes it does take another, when someone's neck and neck, sometimes you need to make that phone call, and it's just kind of the nature of what we do, because we have to get it right. If you select the wrong person, it can make it can make a miserable time for the team,
And it can be just one wrong person. It doesn't even have to be multiple.
Right.
Yeah.
Nope.
One.
Absolutely. And, that's it's kind of the tough part of it is, recruitment is how that team survives, right? We got to recruit the best and there's just negative connotation with the team in the fleet from the maintainers, because I've had my personal opinions about this. I don't think they've done things to incentivize it very well, and so there's some stigmas that get out there. So they try to make it better, and they've inadvertently made it worse. And I raised my concern with that, and I was told that that's just the way it's going to be. So, for example, there's the seashore flow. So if it's your first sea tour, it's supposed to be however many years, right? So typically you do a lot of sea up front, and then it gets less and less as you. So like if it's your first sea tour, you might do 5 years. Then your second tour, you do 4 years. And then your third, you do 3 years, and then it's 3 years after that, So seashore flows is a big deal. Well, they made the Blue Angel sea duty. So what ended up happening was there was people that would, like, their first seashore flow tour would be at like a VFA, which is who we're looking for. We primarily want Hornet maintainers. I mean, we accept all, type model series maintainers, but we do want that at least backbone of a Hornet maintainer. So AMEs, as a prime example, their first tour, sea tour, is a 5-year tour. And if they apply, then they'd go, and what would end up happening was their detail was marked that as their second seashore flow tour, which would mean it's only a 3-year tour. So at the end of it, they would be told that they owe an additional year, which in a sailor mindset, a year at one command is not good, because you don't have any time to, get that eval progression or whatnot. So you kind of have to do at least 2 to 3 years. So now you're looking at 5 years at my first command. I go to the Blues because I thought it'd be a good deal. I get my butt kicked for 3 years because, the place never stops. And now I'm being told by my detailer that I owe yet another year of sea duty because I'm on, and I said, why can't we just make that their first sea, like just call it an extension of their first sea tour? And the detailers didn't want to hear that. They were like, nope, that's their second sea tour. So that's Seashore Flow 2. And, they owe me a year. Well, that's a quick way to get people to go, you know what? On second thought, I don't think I want to do that, because that's asking a lot of a sailor, But, and awards too, that was another thing that was always kind of something that there was a thought process at the Blues, like, your award is to go out there and see the communities and see the nation. So when you leave, that'll be your award for your tour. So a 3-year tour, getting one NAM, sailors, they and there's arguments like, well, NAMs aren't candy. We shouldn't just be handing it out, this, that, the other. I get that argument, but the problem is the fleet has turned it into a candy. So, a typical sailor on a 3-year, 4-year tour is probably going to get 2 to 3 NAMs, because you're going to get a post-deployment NAM, you're going to get a post-AMI NAM, you're going to get, you're going to get an end of tour. And they're smart. They're looking at those things and going, those are points I need to advance. So, I was always trying to say, hey, why can't we do some sort of like mid-tour award for the sailors? And we tried to incorporate that just to kind of incentivize it a little bit to get better, to get more interest into it. There was also some initiatives of like going to Whidbey, going to Lemoore, just getting out there. And I know, so it's kind of funny, that NC1 that I told you that Nick spoiled the surprise. Well, we were needing an NC1, and so I hired him. I recruited him, so I brought him to the team, and he ended up making chief. Great NC, awesome guy. He did a lot with that recruitment effort, putting together PowerPoints, dispelling the myths, bringing maintainers with there to answer some of the questions. So, we're constantly trying to get, people to apply, but it's just not very appealing,
That's a shame, because it is such a unique opportunity. And
it is. It's, people need to stop living in the now and look at the future, because, people are kind of like, I want to be able to go somewhere that makes me chief now. And it's like, well, that place might not make you chief now, but if you look at the statistics, it will make you a chief, very quickly, or officer. The amount of sailors that we had selected a chief, or selected for like OCS or LDO, the numbers are there. Like it's a place that will benefit your career. It just may not, it may not be right here, right now, but that's, we just live in a here and now kind of world. So it is what it is, and that, to me, it helps in the simple fact that at least who is applying, I think at least wants to be there, because I don't want somebody who's like a fence sitter, but when there's not enough interest, you've got to fill those spots, you know what I mean? So, that is what it is.
I know a lot of folks will talk about, especially on the pilot side, that the power of the blue flight suit. And I don't know if it's something that you see. I feel like it's got to be the same thing, the power of that uniform, especially at an air show. I mean, that's where you're interacting with the public, and that's where people, they know who you are. They know how special it is, honestly. Is that something that you felt when you were out there interacting with the public? How any good stories or any good memories of that?
The best one that comes to mind is, we call it out in the crowd time. So there's a point to where we've done our morning turns, the jets are good, all the paperwork's good. There's a little bit of time typically on like Saturday and Sunday on the show days. Again, we have to be there 3 hours prior. So let's say the gates open at 10, so we're there at 7. We get the morning turns done. Everything's wrapped up. We don't go fly until 3. So typically by an hour prior to that is when we're going to be mustering up and getting ready to go out to get everything ready for open ups. So there's, a good maybe 2 to 3 hour window where we can get out in the crowd. So it was something that you always just wanted to make sure that you went out there and did at least on one day, of that show, because just the reaction from, and we'd have all the hound dogs, they call them, and litho, not the lithos, but they're like mini lithos, and the pamphlets, and there's all this stuff you can give out. So just like tapping a kid on the shoulder and he turns around and there's a Blue Angel and you're handing them some sort of, Blue Angel memorabilia, just their eyes lighting up and, getting the pictures. I mean, it's really a unique experience, just having that kind of impact. So me and another chief, we were just kind of doing that out and about, and we did that. There was just a little kid that was kind of, we tapped him on the shoulder, he turned around, and we handed the stuff, and his eyes lit up, and then the mom got a photo, and, we got, high-fived him and did all of that and walked off didn't think anything of it. And I don't know how we found it. I don't know but that mom posted somewhere on Facebook about, these 2 Blue Angels just made my son's day. It's all he's talked about since. And, it was a picture of me and Clint, just there. And it was just what she wrote was like, it hit you, that you have such a, unique opportunity to just influence, when I first got to the team, the boss at the time, Boss Bernanke, he was a big advocate for, we want to inspire a culture of excellence. Like I don't necessarily care if handing that litho or that hound dog to that, if he didn't go and fly, that's not what we're after. We just want him to be the best at whatever he decides to do. So inspire a culture of just excellence. Like it doesn't have to be a Blue Angel. It doesn't have to be a pilot. It doesn't have to be in the Navy. Just whatever it is you're doing, do it to the best of your ability. And just, and I really appreciated that, because we are recruiting, we are under a recruitment type budget, but, for the most part, we just want to, I don't know, make America great,
Yeah, you're showing off that presence. That's what those tax dollars are going for, is
right.
to remind the taxpayer of what, what the pride and professionalism they feel in the U.S. military. So yeah. You're the tip of the spear, I guess, for that specific mission set. Well, Chris, I know you had a lot of really cool opportunities, too, that I can remember specifically were flying in the jet. So a Legacy jet and a Super. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm kind of teasing a little bit ahead here. You were part of the transition. You were there from when the sunset, I guess, of the Legacy jets, and then the new jets came online. So we'll talk about that here in a second. But before we get to it, I was hoping maybe you could tell me about, maybe we can go with the first ride, the first opportunity you got to be in the back of a Blue Angel jet.
So I actually got 3.
Okay. Well, pump the brakes. 3 rides.
3 rides. I was very unique and very appreciative of them. And it's kind of a cool story. The 2019, it was on Mother's Day. We were kind of training kind of the new group because it was getting, I'm getting at the end of the tour here. We need the new guys to kind of take over at that point. And so there was an empty back seat in one of the aircraft when we were at Andrews Air Force Base. We did a joint tour or a joint air show with the Thunderbirds, which is pretty funny about that too. There was on the practice day, it was supposed to be open just to military. And so there was a bunch of military that was out there. And Thunderbirds kind of went out there, looked at the weather. There was a couple like overcast clouds, and they pulled the plug, said, nope, can't do it. Weather is no good. So Blues were like, what are you talking about? So we went up, did a flat show, flew the whole thing, and everybody was like, what? I thought the weather was no good. And we're like, it wasn't good for the Thunderbirds, So the morning of that Sunday morning, there was a empty back seat. We were going to fly one of the jets home. There was that pilot I was talking about that did a lot of behind the scenes for the Legacy-to-Super transition. He was going to fly it back, and it was like, hey, there's this empty back seat. Anybody want it? And I was like, well, I raised my hand. I'm like, is it available to anybody? And, my maintenance officer, he shot it up to boss and it was like, everybody's covered. Basically he's not really doing anything here. We got enough coverage. So yeah, why don't we go ahead and give it to senior? So I got to go through the whole, like you were talking about the protected airspace. He did a good job, like showing me how to file the flight plan. And he had ForeFlight and he was trying to file it through there. Wouldn't let him do it. He had to call the number and give him the whole details, and it was, it's a big deal. But they strapped me in, and it was basically I didn't let my wife know, so I got to surprise her on Mother's Day. But we had a 2-hop it. We ended up landing somewhere in Georgia, and then he was like, "Hey, we need to. There's like some thunderstorms. We got to get ahead of this." And I asked him when we were leaving Andrews, I'm like, are we going to do the high performance climb? He's like, I don't know, man. He's like, we don't have really time to request this. Let's get out of here and get ahead of this weather. And so we taxi out and we're at the hold short, and the controller comes on. He's like, Blue Angel 7, are you looking for unrestricted 10,000? He was like, yep, as a matter of fact, I am. So he was like, all right, clear to take off, runway, whatever, and we taxi out there, and he's like, hold on. And man, just as soon as you get, kind of wheels up, and just going into burner and pulling back. I mean, it seemed like only 3 seconds, and we're like at 10,000 feet. And he turned the airplane around. He's like, look at that. And I'm looking like there's a little, speck down there. He's like, that's the airport we're just at. It's just amazing how quickly that thing can climb. So, and we haul butt to our first gas stop, and then on to home. This is a really unique experience, just to even though it was just a transit flight, it's just still just very thankful for that opportunity.
What do you think of the jet? It being the I say the Legacy Hornet. I don't mean that in any term of offense. The end of a generation of, I think, an awesome airplane. Now the beginning of the next generation, the Super Hornet. But what do you think of the airplane actually being in the back of the jet?
Just sat back and enjoyed the ride. I was glad the ECS worked because the 2-seat Legacy Hornet had a bad reputation for weak ECS. So
warm air, lots of warm air.
Lots of warm air, right. So that jet luckily had good cold air. And it's amazing because I actually learned that on my demo ride. So my demonstration ride, kind of another chance happening, we were supposed to fly like a fleet mass chief was supposed to come in from Virginia. And it was on September 11th of 2019. And they got delayed in Oceana, couldn't make it out due to weather. And again, it was like, open back seat, who wants it? I'm like, well, I haven't had my backseat ride, and it was in the 4 spot. And I'm like, that's the spot I want. I'm like, hey, man, September 11th, this seems like a great opportunity. So I called my wife. I'm like, hey, can you get here, like, now? She's like, yep, I'm on my way. So she was able to make it out, and got strapped in. Now the transit ride was, straight level. We're just getting there. The demonstration is absolutely amazing. It is like the precision, the how close everything is just, you see it from the ground, you go, man, that's close. And then you're right there and you look and you go, I did not realize just how close that was. Even though I've seen it hundreds of times from the ground, they are right there, just right there. You could, if it wasn't for the canopy, I could touch a wingtip of another airplane while we're doing, 100 plus knots. I mean, it just is amazing how close they are. So it was absolutely amazing. And a gorgeous day. I was able to do a full high show. The only maneuver we didn't do was the line abreast loop, where all 5 could do the loop. We just did a flat pass because there was like one lone cloud that bossed in like. But we did 2 Diamond 360s, which is the first maneuver when they do their initial takeoff maneuver, and they come around and we did 2 of those. And then the loop break cross, we did 2 loop break crosses. So I got way more than a normal high show. So a couple extra maneuvers in there, which was awesome. And I lasted the whole time until the pub, which is the pitch up break. So that's the final maneuver, when they're going across the runway to land, and they each individually pitch up about every 3-4 seconds and come in to land. So he was like, this is the one, man, this is what gets everybody. And I was like, do your worst. And he did. So I was kind of like, after that second loop break cross, I was feeling a little queasy. I was making sure the ECS louvers were blowing all that cold air on me. I was kind of making sure I knew exactly where my vomit bag was. And I ended up blacking out on that maneuver. And it was like, man, I felt like I was asleep for 8 hours. I mean, it was insane how just like long it felt, and when I came to, it took another probably 3-4 seconds before I kind of regained exactly where I was and what was going on. I mean, it was just, it was a very weird experience. And then as soon as I came to, I was getting ready. So, we're landing, and, when you land, boss always tries, talk to you, and, he's like, hey, key up, and I'm just just vomiting in. You're going by comm card, and they're all waving at you, and it was pretty bad. But I was happy for the fact that it was we at least wheels were on the ground before that happened. So
yeah, it didn't happen in flight. That's the perfect story.
But it was awesome in Pensacola over that emerald water. You could see dolphins swimming as we were just going over the beaches and whatnot, and it was just awesome. Just an awesome experience to do a demonstration.
Before we talk about your most recent Super Hornet ride, let's talk about the Super Hornet itself. So you got to see the team transition from the Legacy Jets to the Supers. Yep. What was that process like? It was a huge process, but from a maintainer side of the house, how did that look?
It was a lot of behind the scenes. So the whole, chalkboard idea of going to Supers had been there for quite some time. So, they were talking that my second year, like 2018, we were possibly going to be in supers, and then, that didn't pan out. So there was a lot of like pre-stuff that was going on. There was a lot of lists that would go out, like, parts and, support, supply parts that we would need. So there was a lot of that kind of stuff going out, like that. We'd get random taskings of like, hey, what would this look like? Start thinking about this, and how are we going to get around this for the super? So all these kinds of things were like happening, but until they actually like threw a dart at a date and like said this is when it's going to happen, it just didn't really seem like it was going to ever happen. You know what I mean? Just one of those things. But that dart finally hit, and it just so happened to coincide with so 2019 was my last show year. I was there 17, 18, and 19 were my show season years. And I had orders to another command, and I don't know, I just wasn't feeling it, and I decided to retire. It's a whole nother story as to what and why, but I made the decision that, hey, I'm just going to end my career here and let the chips fall where they may. So what that meant, though, was instead of going on to another command like I had orders to, I had about a year and some change left on my contract, so they had to figure out what to do. It just so happened that they had thrown that dart against a date, and they were like, well, you'd be a perfect candidate to do all this Blue Angel transition, since the goal was to have them in the they wanted it for the 75th anniversary, so that was the target season that they wanted to get all that stuff done. So it actually worked out very well. So when the team left for the 2020 show season, so late 2019 into 2020, I stayed behind, did not go to El Centro, and there was a couple other people on the team that were selected to stay on board for an extra year to do transition. So we did a lot of admin stuff. We were going through lists of Emerald part numbers. Emerald is like our support equipment type stuff, like all the little bit pieces that you need to do this inspection. So we're going through, and you don't think about, there's a lot of Emerald that a squadron would have that you're just not going to need, because they're like for loading bombs, and they're for doing countermeasure tests, and there's stuff that you were just not going to need. So it was doing a lot of research, and what's this? Oh, that's not something we're going to need. What's this? Oh, that's something that we're going to need two of, even though a fleet squadron might only have one, because we're always going to have one back home and one on the road, kind of thing. So we had to supply a lot of justifications for that kind of thing as to why we're asking for more than what a fleet squadron would. So it was a lot of just kind of behind the scenes stuff while they were in El Centro, and then it was working towards accepting that first airplane and being qualified once it landed. So we had to work with Oceana to like qualify our people, because even though we've worked on Legacy Hornets, it doesn't translate to all the qualifications you need for a Super Hornet. And when you're dealing with a transition, typically you're at a site that has that available airframe, and so you have the ability to go and do maintenance on them, do ground turns, do all the things that you would need, and have somebody who's qualified sign you off. Well, we don't have any supers around here. There was nobody to come and say yay or nay. So we had to do a lot of like kind of in-house training based off of people that were previously qualified, and use them to train us, and then have Oceana come down and then basically grant and say, yep, you guys are qualified. We feel confident that you're going to be able to, be safe for flight with the supers. So we worked towards that goal of getting all of our maintenance personnel qualified, getting to that point where we've incorporated all the maintenance practices for Super Hornets into our instructions and everything, and we're able to get Super Hornet safe for flight. And then we accepted our first airplane in, I don't know the exact date, and this is pretty bad, I should know this date, but it was in like mid-June, and man, it was a good feeling to see a blue Super.
What are the differences, the big differences between the Legacy jets and the Supers?
The Super's bigger. 33% is the rough number. The flight controls, you'll notice, are just larger, like the horizontal stabs, vertical stabs. I mean, like from a distance, if one was to your left and the other was to your right, you could kind of look back and forth and they'd look the same. But there's once you get them kind of side by side, the differences are pretty obvious. The leading edge extension, which is that kind of pre-wing that comes from the start of the canopy. That's a much larger. It sits higher, which was kind of funny because some of the crew chiefs who dropped the ladder, they were not, some of them were not tall enough to grab the super. Because of that, there's actually in the fuel door, there's a button you can push that'll automatically drop the ladder. So there was discussion: are we going to use that during the show to drop the ladder? Or are we going to have people on basically like platform shoes to drop the ladder? How is this all going to be incorporated? The intakes are square versus the Legacies are round, so that's a pretty obvious one when you're looking at them side by side. But the engines are bigger and louder too, so it's a much more aggressive show now.
I think it sounds great. It is a lot of noise.
Yeah. So,
and not to get into an area of hopefully not classification, I certainly don't want to, but I know there was a lot of hay made. You never want to take a photo down the inlet of a Super Hornet, definitely an F-35 and F-22, whatever. But is there any lingering concern? I mean, this is a demo airplane that's now in front of the crowd all the time. I'm guessing that's not a concern or a consideration.
It's funny. I talked to my dad about that because I always asked him why. Like, what is that? And I guess you can figure out a top speed of an aircraft by doing that. That's what.
As I understand it, there's certain geometry back there that has to do with basically you're trying to hide the signature of the airplane, the engine, that flat face of the front stage compressors from a radar perspective provides a pretty good look. And so the way and this is no secret, this is something anyone can look up online, but the way that is hidden, the way that it's faceted, if you had enough high-resolution photos of the inside of one of those, I'm guessing theoretically you could defeat some of whatever that secret sauce is that goes into that design. And so, I know when the Supers were out there, obviously just like when they hit the fleet to start with, when they first hit the air show circuit, there was a lot of, hey, no photos down the front. Right. And I've heard that same thing with F-35, with F-22 especially, no photos down the front or up the back.
It was nothing that was ever brought up as far as the transition. It may be a talking point now, now that they're, out on the show site circuit, that, hey, this is, if you see somebody doing it, kindly ask them not to, but it's hard not to.
And our allies have the jet now, right? Like, Kuwait and all these other countries fly the Super Hornet just like the F-35, and those other countries fly that as well. So
that was not, it was just not something that we discussed. There was a lot of other, there's the Super it has to have a certain type of fuel because they use.
When you say fuel, you mean like Jet A versus JP7?
Correct.
Okay.
So, and then even the Jet A, there's like, I guess, different additives that are added to
Prist. Either with Prist or without Prist.
So, the variable exhaust nozzles on the Super are controlled by fuel, which in the Legacy they were controlled by oil. So you would just pump, basically engine oil, the same, in there, and that's what would be used to hydraulically actuate the variable exhaust. On the Super, they incorporated the fuel system into that, and so because of that, all the bearings and the rollers and whatnot, they have to be lubricated, and so if you do not have those special additives, you'll actually get lockouts. So that's like a really big deal, is like, because there's some show sites that are just not going to have that type of fuel. So I think initially there was some issues with, it's called a hydromech lockout, where because it's fuel actuated, the FADEC, if the FADEC commands the VEN to open and it doesn't open because the rollers are bound up for whatever reason, it assumes that, well, maybe there's a busted line and it's dumping fuel in there. It'll assume that there's no movement because there's a leaking line, and it'll cut fuel off to the whole VEN system. So now your VEN is locked. That was kind of a big deal. They wrote some maintenance procedures into the manual as to what to do in Blue Angel. They were trying to calculate, can we get away with flying it for 10 hours? And then what does that look like? Is it 10 flights? Does it, they were talking about maybe adding a special adapter so they could put the stuff in while it was being pumped. You would basically hook it up to the fuel port and then hook a fuel hose up to that and dump, have the additives be, kind of introduced that way. But I don't know what the end game is, but that was a lot of the stuff that we were involved with.
What about the cockpit itself of the jet? So I'm guessing that same stopwatch is still in there.
Same stopwatch is in there. That shoot strobe is incorporated in with the fuel stuff. I mean, the Legacy to Super cockpit, I mean, it's very, very similar. You've got your HUD, you've got your two DDIs, you've got your HSI, it's called an MPCD, so a multi-purpose color display is what it's referred to as. A lot of the display and buttonology and all the switchology kind of stuff, it's very, very similar, so...
How do you activate the smoke? Is it on the stick? Is it on the throttles?
It is on the throttle. So okay. there's an arm. There's actually a way to arm it. Once it's armed, it's on the throttle. And they actually, so I don't know if they were doing this on the Supers. On the Legacy, they would actually remove the trigger. They're not concerned. They didn't want anything to interfere with, how they're, because they have that stick spring. That was another thing that, you had asked about the different modifications. They install, it's an artificial feel system, AFS system. And all it is a spring that pulls back, pulls it so that you have to pull.
It pulls
back.
the stick forward.
It pulls
so
the
you
stick
have
forward.
To pull back,
so yes, exactly. Sorry, my terminology.
No, I'm with you.
So yeah, they're constantly pulling back on it, and it just gives them enhanced fidelity in the maneuvers and whatnot. So there was a couple modification issues with that on the Super, just because it wasn't the same in a Legacy, and so they had to kind of re-notch some stuff, and so it was fun working with the engineers and just getting these first modified aircraft. We had Boss Doyle, and then there was a couple other of previous Blue Angel pilots that were able, once we got enough, 2, 3 accepted and able to fly, to go up and practice some of the maneuvers real time, because everything prior to that had all been done in simulators. So yeah, I mean, you can do it all day in a sim, but you really don't know until you have it, in real life and in real world scenarios there. So did a lot of the flight testing and a lot of the, kind of getting the data from the pilots, feeding the data to the engineers, working through, hey, is it supposed to be doing this? It's not, is this a feature or a bug, kind of thing, so it was a lot of just cool stuff that, behind the scenes that most people wouldn't, really think about,
Any idea where those jets came from? Were they the oldest, essentially, ones out there in the fleet?
They are the oldest Supers, lot 21s and 22s. So they're the first. That was the first Super Hornets, which made a interesting supply conundrum, because some of the lot 21 hydraulic system, it is so original that it doesn't even exist. They modified stuff out of it for whatever reason. So part support is going to be, I think, an issue for them, and it creates a whole issue with parts, because the fleet is hurting on Super Hornet parts. Generators are a big problem. There's a lot of avionics parts. Who is going to work on these avionics parts? That was a big question. They have an AIMD here on base that supports some very minimal things avionics-wise, but they were actually looking to increase the capability by getting a certain test bench that could run a lot of the avionic gear. And that's still in the works. They're looking to do that just to kind of help alleviate Lemoore and Oceana, that has a high volume of Super Hornet parts that come through.
Yeah, their priority is the fleet aircraft, the
Right.
aircraft that are actually out there on the carriers right now.
It's funny. There's always this the Blues are a FAD one, which means they get FAD is it's a identifier code that basically if you put a part out there, a requisition, if you're FAD 1, you get it first, and then FAD 2 gets it next. And so it's just basically another hierarchy to your priority codes. And we are not FAD 1. I will squash that right here. We are FAD 2. We are just like any other fleet deployable squadron as far as parts go. Now, we kind of got fat, dumb, and happy, because as the Legacy transitioned out, they were able to scoop a lot of those parts and have, they would come our way. And so now that we're having to fight the fleet again, because the whole fleet is Supers basically now. So I don't know. I haven't really asked the team how that's going, but I just know that that's probably going to be an area where they're going to really have to kind of divvy up who gets what. So
yeah, for sure. Your third Blue Angel ride in the back of a jet wasn't a Super Hornet.
It was.
That was the end of your time at the team, correct?
Team and career.
Team and career. Well, let's talk about that flight. What was it like?
So I'd kind of, COVID happened and wrecked any chance for a retirement. So I had a date set, and I had a date at the museum because I came here my very first command, or after boot camp, I came here for A school. So, and I was on what was called the performing units, where we did colors for the retirements, and we would do some parade stuff and whatnot. And so I did a lot of time with retirements there at the museum. And I always told myself, like, when I retire, it's going to be here at the museum, because just being under that atrium with the A4 diamond there, it's a very unique place in naval aviation. I'm sure it's used a lot for different kinds of things. So to have that to be my retirement spot was like, that's what I want to do. COVID happened. Well, actually, two things: the shooting and COVID have kind of really hampered the museum and what it's they're capable of doing. I don't think they're supporting. I think they can still support retirements, but you have to keep the civilian guest list to a minimum, and it just doesn't make it as enticing as it once was. So I just figured I wasn't going to have a retirement, and just kind of sneak away off into the darkness and just grow a goatee, and but I was talking with our NC, and I just kind of threw it out there. I'm like, well, maybe I could just get a ride in the back of a Super, since I did all this transition stuff. Maybe just give me a ride in the back of the Super. I'll park, we'll park, there'll be bullets set up, I'll get out of the airplane, walk through the bullets, and that'll be my send off. And he kind of looked and said, we'll see. Yeah, he was like, yeah. So I didn't think nothing of it. And then I got a call from the Mo, and he was like, hey, I hear you want to have your retirement in the back of a jet. And I was like, well, I mean, it'd be nice. That would be awesome. And he said, yeah, we can make that happen. I need you to see Doc on this date. Make sure you're there. You got to get a flight physical, and, laid everything out there. And so luckily all the stars aligned, and it was very small kind of thing. My wife and two boys were able to be there, and they sent me off, and Seven was really good. He was the one who was flying. Great guy. He shot me a text, hey senior, like, what is it you're looking for? And I told him, I was like, I want like low and slow and just relaxed. And I was like, I'd love to fly over my mom's house that's in Mary Esther. He was like, what's the address? And yeah, I put in the address, and he kind of figured out where it was at, and was like, I think we can make that happen. So we took off, did the whole high performance climb, and it took me out to, 2508 or one of the operating areas out there. And he was like, you sure you don't want to do any crazy stuff? And I'm like, I really, I'm like, let's try it, but I'm not feeling it, So we did a couple G-worms, he went like, okay, there's 2G, and now we're going to go right. All right, there's 3G. We'll go back. Here's 4G. And he kind of leveled out. He's like, how you feeling, senior? And I'm like, I was turning green, and I'm just like, I'm not feeling this at all. It's like, oh, okay, well, we got a great opportunity out here. Are you sure there's nothing you want to do? I'm like, well, let's just do a high alpha. I want to see, this thing at that speed. So, it was really cool to be at like 125 knots, just kind of just cruising right along. And, I've been doing some flight training, so I'm like, man, that 120, I know how fast that is in a Cessna. It doesn't seem like it's lightning speed. So to have like this huge Super just kind of barely, floating by was pretty cool. So I asked him, like, well, hey, what's, because we get stall training. I'm like, hey, how far back do you got to pull to get this thing to stall? And he's like, this thing doesn't stall. And he just pulled back and then put like the burners on, and we went up to about 10,000 feet and leveled off. And so he was like, all right, what is it you really want to do? I was like, low and slow by the beach. And luckily, well, I wouldn't say luckily, there was a cloud layer like right at 1,000. So he could dip under like 1,000. And I mean, we were just right along the beach. And I was like, I want to shoot an approach, because I had just gotten my instrument rating. So I was like, I had my iPad. I'm like totally geeking out here, I'm like, I just want to like like read an approach plate, and shoot an approach in a Super Hornet, and a Blue Angel Super Hornet. It sounds stupid, I know, but I don't know, man. It made sense to me at the time. I had an opportunity to do loops and this, that, the other, and I'm like, I don't want to like puke at my retirement. So we shot, like, I think it was 1-7 at Eglin. We flew out to Eglin. He tried to get over to my mom's house, but just because of the weather and everything, it didn't really line up. But requested the ILS to 1-7 there, and they were like, okay, they vectored us north, and we're going north, and kept going north, and we're like, what's going on here? We were like actually getting to the Alabama line, like we were that far north, and the tower guy, actually I think we were talking to approach at the time. He was like, hey, is Blue Angel 7? Is that your call sign? And he's like, yeah, it's Blue Angel 7, line up for runway 17 ILS, or requesting the runway 17 ILS. He's like, all right, well, hold on a second. We're going to go get all our friends. And so they were probably calling all their buddies to come up to the tower, because they had no idea that there was going to be a Blue Angel doing a touch and go at Eglin. So finally we get vectored back around and get on the approach, and just did a touch and go at Eglin, and took off and flew back to Pensacola, and then got a PAR approach. Because the weather had gotten so bad. So, and that was really unique to see, because I've heard of a PAR, but it's not something you get trained to when on the civilian side. So it was really cool to have the controller kind of talking to you and like, come this way, little right, little left, that, giving you all that information. I thought it was really cool. And came in, landed, and sure enough, as we're taxiing in, there are all the bullets, the red carpet, and then Boss, XO, CMC, the whole Chiefs, like all these people I was not expecting, because, the way the Blue Angels works, once you kind of, I wasn't checked out of the command, but I hadn't gone to El Centro with them. I had, we'd been doing the transition, but we were in a separate hangar, and I didn't go over to the team because it's different. That's their 2020 team. They gelled in El Centro. I'm just this guy that's like, kind of hanging on like a barnacle at this point, I'm kind of a nobody at this point, so just to have everybody there, and, I was able to canopy comes up, I had my cover, I get down and walk through, and then walk the family through. It was just, man, what a truly amazing end to a career.
I'm guessing a lot of people don't get to do that. A lot of people don't actually end their career at the Blues. So for you, again, what a special way to end it.
Yeah. Most people, there's very few. Our maintenance master chief retired there, but there's very few retirements from the Blues. A lot of people, when they go there, they're very young. They have a lot of career left for them. And I was young too. I could have continued on, but like I said, it's a separate story. We could talk about it. Just they always say when it's your time to leave the Navy, you'll know. And I knew. And so I did it, and I've been out for 1.5 years now. And I will say that it was a great decision. So
yeah, for sure.
I had a great tour, did a lot of unique and just amazing things while I was in. But, I think it was just time to put that to rest and focus on family and, just building, presence in the community here. So
looking back on your time, and not just in the Blues, but in the Navy in general, one thing I always think is really kind of, instructive, incisive, whatever you want to call it to me, is finding the people that you look up to, people that the term mentor, maybe even just as a friend, but people that you say, hey, that's who I want to be when I grow up. Were there folks that as you've come up through naval aviation that have inspired you and that you look up to in that way, and that, that's who you want to be when you grow up? I'm using air quotes here, right? But that's who you want to become as a leader.
Well, there's plenty of people along the way that have helped me, but I think ultimately, just like my dad has had such a big influence on the decisions that I've made throughout my career, when I hit rock bottom when I was growing up and made that decision to join the Navy, was because my dad was in the Navy. And so, and then, just to aspire to fly, to aspire to be in the Blues, it was always just to try to, I feel like match what he did, because, he was Naval Academy graduate, test pilot, once he got out, a very successful career as an airline pilot. I mean, just had a lot of influence, I think, there. Leader-wise, though, I mean, I can name so many leaders that I've just, I've always could just look back and go, man, they were maybe not at the time, but it's looking back, they really did shape and sometimes the people that are pushing you may not think are pushing you at the time, but you realize later on that no, they were pushing you to just get the most out of the potential that you have. So I mean, I don't want to pinpoint anyone. I think, like I said, the biggest, I think, influence overall was just trying to be as close, and I'll never achieve, I think, as good as he is because of just the things he does and continues to do. It's just, I've always wanted to be, have him say he's proud of the things I've done. So
okay, Chris, I'll limit it just to the Blues because you've had such a long and distinguished career, but we'll just kind of those couple of years here in Pensacola, you got to go to some awesome places. You got to see two different types of Hornet, something that, the Blues have not seen a new jet in a long, long time. So what I'm getting at, such a varied career, even in that relatively short period of time. What would you have done differently? Anything looking back with the benefit of time that you would say, yeah, that, you know what, actually I should have done this or maybe taken this path instead of that one? Anything you look back on now?
Stopped and smelled the roses, I guess, a little bit, and just it moves so fast and you get so wrapped around in, maintenance and thinking about inspections and what are we going to do here? And, I think there's so many missed opportunities where I should have just, should have just taken them, like when there's a chance for like, hey, I could have a couple hours to myself and decompress or, go on this not mandatory commit and go see these things. I probably should have gone and saw those things, but, that's like a hindsight kind of thing, almost like one of those, is it really a regret or is it just, because in the moment, maybe I needed that decompressed time to make sure that I'm fully focused on what we needed to be doing. I'm kind of like when I go all in, when I'm all in. So, I mean, I just exhaust a lot of just brain energy to ensure that I'm thinking about all things. And so when there's that after party, or there's that after event, I don't have it in me, to do that. But looking back, I wish I kind of took a more advantage of those opportunities. But I mean, if that's what I'm complaining, if that's the thing I would do different, I mean, I feel like, and it wasn't just me, it was the mess that we had, the Chiefs mess, the sailors that we had. I mean, I think that the 3 years, that team was just amazing. I mean, like I told you the story of of that flyover. I mean, there's countless stories I could tell of just where we came together and made it happen, and just through all the ups and the downs and the good times and the bad times, because it's like any organization is not going to be 100% all the time. But I think everybody persevered well, and I really don't have too many regrets. Like I said, if those are my regrets of just not going to as many little functions and things that I could, I think that's a good tour. But yeah, I don't think I would have changed much of anything. I think it happened the way it was supposed to happen. And I miss it. I really do miss it. But like I said, it changes so rapidly. Like if I went over there now, it's been so long that the team has changed that I'm like an unrecognizable face. It's just, and that's kind of like that whole blue suit thing. Like once you take that suit off, I mean, you're just just a maintainer, just a pilot. Just it's a lot of the notoriety comes from the fact that you're just in that suit. So it does kind of re-humble you that you had that opportunity, you had that fun, you did all. I know that I did the best that I could while I was there, and I did everything that I felt was right for not just myself but for the team, and I loved every minute of it.
Okay, Chris, I end these all the same way, so we'll end yours the same way as well. Any final thoughts? Any last words? You get the last word.
No, I'm not a final words kind of guy. I appreciate the opportunity. I know it's a lot of like pilots, aviation type stuff that you're doing. So to have a maintainer perspective, I know that was something you were really looking forward to, and I appreciate the opportunity. You know, I'm humbled by the fact that you wanted to talk to me about my career. So
thanks again. Yeah, appreciate it, man.